Kami mungkin itu yang menopang kami dalam kami punya kehidupan hari-hari untuk menunjang kebutuhan keluarga dan juga kebutuhan anak-anak dalam mereka sekolah. Kalau untuk pribadi Mama merasa bahwa tidak cukup, cuma 2.100.000 tidak cukup untuk kebutuhan keluarga kami hari-hari.
Ya Mama bikin bagaimana? Mama mau tinggal di rumah mau jadi apa? Mama dan tidak mau Mama harus bantu Bapak. Karena Mama di Bapak punya hidup ini hanya nelayan. Memang kita punya hidup itu menderita dulu.
Kebumen ini salah satu kabupaten yang hitungannya termiskin di Jawa Tengah. Kita sangat concern karena hampir 25,6% anggaran itu kita curahkan untuk penanganan kemiskinan.
Langkah-langkah kita dalam penanggulangan kemiskinan ekstrim, yang pertama adalah mengurangi beban pengeluaran, yang kedua adalah meningkatkan pendapatan, yang ketiga adalah meningkatkan ekonomi kerakyatan, UMKM dan usaha-usaha yang ada di masyarakat, yang kelima adalah mensinergiskan program-program yang ada di pemerintah Kabupaten Kebumen.
Yang kami lakukan adalah penanganan kawasan kumuh dahulu sebagai kantong kemiskinan dengan kolaborasi bersama mulai dari 7 komponen kekumuhan tadi, sehingga diharapkan kemiskinan ini juga turut berkurang dengan penanganan kantong-kantong kemiskinan tadi.
Klaster pertama adalah program bantuan sosial terpadu berbasis rumah tangga, keluarga atau individu. Klaster kedua adalah program pemberdayaan masyarakat dan penguatan pelaku usaha mikro dan kecil. Dan klaster yang terakhir adalah program lainnya yang secara langsung atau tidak langsung dapat meningkatkan kegiatan ekonomi dan kesejahteraan masyarakat miskin.
Kami keluarkan kebijakan baru untuk pengembangan jagung ini. Kami minta kepada semua kepala desa dan camat untuk kawal satu desa atau satu lurah minimal 5 hektar.
Puji Tuhan kami sudah punya data sehingga kami dapat melihat di beberapa wilayah administrasi ada 6 distrik, 57 kampung. Dari 6 distrik itu kita petakan semua melalui data SAIK yang sudah ada. Sehingga kami sudah tahu mana yang miskin, mana yang miskin ekstrim.
Upaya penghapusan kemiskinan ekstrim ini perlu dilakukan secara sinergi, secara konvergen, dan juga secara kolaboratif. Oleh karena itu, dalam rangka untuk pelaksanaan dari Instruksi Presiden nomor 4 tahun 2022 tentang percepatan penghapusan kemiskinan ekstrim, kami di TNP 2K mencoba untuk mendorong sebetulnya upaya untuk peningkatan kolaborasi antar pihak. Dalam hal ini ada 5 pihak yang akan terlibat secara aktif di dalam upaya percepatan penghapusan kemiskinan ekstrim atau yang dikenal dengan 5 helix atau pentahelix.
Pemerintah daerah membentuk sebuah lembaga sekretariat bersama untuk menjadi mitra bagi teman-teman NGO LSM baik internasional, regional dan lokal dan juga pihak swasta serta masyarakat untuk bekerja bersama-sama.
Menangani kemiskinan ekstrim bagi kami bahwa semua upaya kita itu tepat sasaran dan kita harus membuka diri terhadap kerjasama dengan semua pihak. Ini tidak urusan pemerintah semata karena ini urusan kita semua, tetapi kita harus membangun kolaborasi dengan semua pihak dengan program-program lain yang kami tahu punya dampak pada masyarakat.
Kami diberi 40 titik sebenarnya bantuan untuk peternakan ayam yang masing-masing titik itu nilainya sekitar 20-25 juta.
One of our projects in Bali focuses on improving the coffee value chain. So in this project we work with many different actors. We work with the farmers, we work with the local government, the cooperatives, as well as coffee buyers.
Kegiatan atau materi yang kami coba perkenalkan kepada petani kopi di Pajahan, salah satunya adalah bagaimana cara
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Coordinating Ministry of Human Development and Cultural Affairs. Our event is about to begin, so please be seated. Thank you so much.
Kita mulai dengan tanaman umur pendek. Tanaman dari usia 0 sampai dengan 30 hari, 0, 21, 30 hari seperti kangkung, bayam, caisim, satu bedeng
dengan ukuran 1 kali 10 meter, itu panen rata-rata 200.000. Maka kita wajibkan satu petani 10 bedeng dengan panen 2 juta per bulan. Dari hasil penjualan itu mereka ada yang beli sepeda motor, ada yang bisa pasang listrik, bahkan itu dipakai untuk kuliah anak.
Keterbatasan akses untuk mendapatkan produk kami itu menjadi kendala bagi petani. Maka dari itu kami memutuskan untuk menempatkan cabang di NTT, khususnya di Kupang. Dengan harapan adanya cabang ini bisa memangkas disparitas harga yang cukup signifikan, sehingga kebermanfaatan dari pupuk ini bisa digunakan dengan semaksimal-maksimalnya.
Kami dari Bank BPD Bali menyalurkan beberapa program ECR salah satu bedah rumah, ingin membantu masyarakat yang keterbelakangan miskin, apalagi rumahnya belum layak huni, mungkin belum punya toilet, belum punya sarana yang lain.
Di Sumatera Utara sendiri, di wilayah kami mendapatkan target 5.600 pelanggan dengan program BPBL atau bantuan pemasangan baru listrik. Salah satunya adalah dengan kita melistriki masyarakat yang memang tidak mampu.
Program KKN di Universitas Udayana yang pertama itu adalah KKN tematik yang melibatkan mahasiswa dalam waktu yang lebih lama, yaitu 1 semester. Apakah nanti 1 semester tidak cukup, memungkinkan mereka diperpanjang menjadi 2 semester atau 3 semester berkaitan dengan Merdeka Belajar Kampus Merdeka.
Kami dari KKN itu menemukan bahwa permasalahan yang paling besar itu adanya penumpukan sampah organik yang masih belum bisa dikelola dengan baik. Makanya di sini kami mengangkat bagaimana cara penyelesaian supaya sampah organik ini bisa dikelola sekaligus dapat berdampak pada ekonominya juga bagi peserta TPS itu sendiri.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to start the event in 5 minutes. Please be seated. Thank you.
Hutan mangrove-nya. Di sini kita sudah membentuk sebuah koperasi yang namanya Koperasi Nelayan Cinta Mangrove, dan koperasi ini kita harapkan untuk mewadahi pengelolaan hutan mangrove ini sebenarnya. Harapan kami program perintisan ini bisa dilanjutkan. Jadi sustainability-nya mungkin harus kita pikirkan bersama.
Kita menerjunkan dosen-dosen kami ke lapangan, ke desa-desa untuk memberikan penyuluhan kepada keluarga KPM atau keluarga penerimaan manfaat agar para keluarga ini lebih termotivasi untuk bisa, ya khususnya di 2 aspek, yaitu pendidikan yang pertama dan yang kedua aspek kesehatan, ya agar para KPM ini lebih termotivasi untuk menyekolahkan anak-anak.
Nah, Sahabatin FM, baru-baru aja kemarin Wakil Bupati Kebumen ini sudah meluncing aplikasi Sobatku. Ini adalah aplikasi atau sistem informasi bantuan sosial terpadu. Nah, di aplikasi Sobatku ini, Sahabatin FM ini bisa mengecek apakah Anda ini bisa mendapatkan bantuan sosial atau data-data Anda ini sudah ada di aplikasi tersebut.
Media massa ini kan prinsipnya menyampaikan informasi yang penting buat publik. Apapun dia sampaikan kalau itu bernilai. Kemiskinan ini adalah salah satu news value-nya tinggi karena dia soal kemanusiaan. Sebenarnya media massa sudah cukup banyak memberikan informasi mengenai bagaimana kemiskinannya diangkat ke permukaan. Bahkan ada program-program TV yang justru menonjolkan kemiskinan itu sendiri.
Tujuannya juga untuk dalam rangka untuk pengentasan kemiskinan juga. Pemberdayaan ekonomi, sosialisasi program pemerintah, bidang pertanian, peternakan, dan lain-lain. Media bekerja sama pemerintah penting, tetapi lagi-lagi kerjasamanya harus produktif, harus efektif.
Ladies and gentlemen, our event is about to begin. Please be seated at the available seats. Thank you.
Pihak warga dapat gotong royong membantu saya. Saya terima kasih semuanya atas partisipasinya.
1, dapat bimbingan dari Basnas. Kedua, dapat perlindungan juga dari Basnas. Ketiga, misalkan saya punya masalah, Basnas turun tangan langsung.
Kepala Bank BPD, kayak Ibu Arias meriki, kayak Bapak Bupati meriki, oleh pendalamu bisa ngelakuin macerok-cokan pulas. Terima kasih mantan ampun, maka samian ini kekewan tiangnya.
Dari pendampingan Yayasan Kopernik yang dilakukan di Desa Pajahan, dari sanalah saya sendiri dan kelompok tani yang ada di Desa Pajahan itu mulai melihat bahwa budidaya yang baik, pengolahan pasca panen yang baik akan menghasilkan produk kopi yang baik dan bisa dibilang menjadi jalan keluar untuk kami karena pandemi yang kemarin kami bisa menanggulangi lagi tentang kondisi ekonomi dan bisa lebih memperbaiki hasil daripada pertanian kopi robusta yang ada di Desa Pajahan.
Semenjak ada listrik, malam pun bisa buat tape. Jadi bertambah bikinan tapenya. Kalau dulu 8 sampai 10 kilo, kalau sekarang bisa di atas 10 kilo sampai 70 kilo pun bisa kalau ada tempahan.
Kami sudah kerjasama dengan Dinas Pertanian dan didampingi oleh Yayasan Krishna Foundation. Yayasan bisa menghubungi ke pihak pemerintah, membantu kami. Ini sawi kami sudah panen sudah 2 kali, 2 bulan. Jadi kebutuhan ekonomi dalam rumah cukup memuaskan untuk biaya dalam rumah tangga, bahkan anak sekolah.
Setelah lihat tembok mulai naik, ada rasa bahagia. Tidak bisa diungkapkan dengan kata-kata. Tapi terima kasih berkat Tuhan dan pemerintah karena saya boleh dapat rumah yang layak untuk dihuni.
Ya, saya sangat berterima kasih karena
Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to welcome the Coordinating Minister of Human Development and Cultural Affairs. Please be seated. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, participants joining online and in person at the Coordinating Ministry of Human Development and Cultural Affairs, we are about to welcome the Coordinating Minister for Human Development and Cultural Affairs. Please be seated. Thank you.
Begitu besar perhatian beliau kepada ibu-ibu, kepada anak-anak kita, terutama masalah stunting dan kemiskinan ekstrim.
Dasar yang dilakukan sehingga Kabupaten Biru ini dapatkan angka stunting sampai 44%. Kegiatan yang Biren ini sudah berhasil menekan angka stunting sangat cepat dan tadi banyak edukasi yang dilakukan.
Sampai hari ini kita bisa menekan angka stuntingnya 0.
Kami fokus kepada manusianya untuk perbaikan gizi dan untuk posyandu pun tahun ini kami desa kami terbanyak Pak untuk dana desa 71 juta. Posyandu yang belum ada antropometrinya sudah lengkap? Belum Pak. Waktu itu hasil pemeriksaan kesehatannya seperti apa?
Bahasa kerennya.
Hari ini saya di desa Menasadaya, salah satu desa yang ada di Kabupaten Biren. Kabupaten Biren ini termasuk kabupaten yang paling baik dalam penanganan penurunan stunting dan penghapusan kemiskinan ekstrim untuk Provinsi Aceh. Karena itu saya memberi penghargaan yang tinggi kepada pemerintah daerah dan seluruh masyarakat Biren yang telah bekerja keras untuk mentuntaskan stunting dan kemiskinan ekstrim di kabupaten ini, dan mudah-mudahan bisa dicontoh oleh kabupaten dan kota yang lain. Tadi sudah saya dialog dengan kepala desa, dengan kader BKK, kader BKKBN, ketua dan juga dengan perangkat kepala dinas, mengecek semua keberadaan berbagai macam program yang dimasukkan untuk menuntaskan kemiskinan dan kemiskinan ekstrim dan kemiskinan stunting itu, dan sudah berjalan dengan cukup baik. Tadi sudah saya minta untuk disempurnakan, misalnya untuk desa-desa yang MCK-nya masih belum 100% supaya di 100%-kan, dan kemudian juga air minum, air bersih yang masih kurang juga terpenuhi, karena intervensi sensitif juga tidak kalah penting dibanding intervensi spesifik yang berasal dari Kementerian Kesehatan. Tani itu memang Assalamualaikum. Dari desa Dempol.
Telurnya juga berapa? 1 kilo Pak.
Bapak Menko ingin belanja masalah apa yang dihadapi masyarakat demi kita ini bisa sejahtera bersama-sama.
Kita itu mempunyai kegiatan yang namanya Pandai Gemati. Inovasinya Pandai Gemati. Pandai Gemati. Iya, kegiatan kenangan terpadu Desa Dempol atasi stunting. Dijadikan lele, bukan bibit.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great honor that we announce the arrival of the Coordinating Minister for Human Development and Cultural Affairs of Republic of Indonesia, Professor Dr. Muhajir Effendi. We kindly request everyone to please stand up to welcome him. Thank you. His Excellency, Coordinating Minister for Human Development and Cultural Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Jakarta, Indonesia for the ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community Knowledge Forum on Gender Equality and Family Development, Empowering Equality, Advancing Care Economics and Social Protection. My name is Usha from the Australia-Indonesia Partnership for Economic Development, and I will be your Master of Ceremony for today. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, before we start the event, please all rise for Indonesia's national anthem. Next, we will hear a keynote speech from the Coordinating Minister for Human Development and Cultural Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia. Please join me to welcome to the stage Profesor Dr. Muhajir Effendi.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. Yang saya hormati Ses Menko PMK, Bapak Andi Megantara, Sekretaris Jenderal Kementerian Tenaga Kerja, Bapak Profesor Anwar Sanusi, Deputi Bidang Kewirausahaan Kementerian Koperasi dan UMKM, Ibu Siti Azizah, Deputi Bidang Koordinasi Peningkatan Kesejahteraan Sosial Kemenko PMK, Prof. Nunung Nuryantono, Ibu Woro Siastuti, Deputi Bidang Peningkatan Kualitas Anak Perempuan dan Muda Kemenko PMK, para staf khusus, Bapak Joko Kusnanto Anggoro, Ibu Excellency Ibu Maria Christine Josephine Balmes, Deputy Executive Director for Operation and of the Philippines Commission on Women. Welcome to my office. Bapak Alan Setiawan, Kepala Tim Kebijaksanaan TNP2K. Ibu Ririn Salwa Purnawasari, Senior Economist with the World Bank's East Asia and Pacific Poverty and Equality Global Practice. Ibu Dianati Setunalari, Peneliti Senior PFEB, Ibu Dela Temanggung, Deputy Director of Advisory and Policy Prospera, Ibu Dante Rikmalia, Ketua Umum Komisi Nasional Disabilitas, and Xiao Guan, Singapore ASGG Second Main Officers. Bapak Ibu sekalian yang berbahagia, forum ini diselenggarakan untuk menyongsong sidang Dewan Pilar Sosial Budaya ASEAN ke-30 serta KTT ASEAN di awal bulan September nanti. Hasil diskusi hari ini akan kita bawa untuk mewarnai jalannya pembahasan dalam sidang-sidang ASEAN ke depan. Sebagaimana kita ketahui bahwa pandemi COVID-19 telah banyak memberikan pelajaran berharga kepada kita, terutama dalam pengembangan sistem perlindungan sosial dan pengakuan terhadap ekonomi perawatan. Sejumlah studi menunjukkan bahwa selama pandemi, beban kerja perawatan yang harus ditanggung oleh perempuan itu semakin bertambah dan menempatkan perempuan dalam situasi yang lebih rentan dibanding laki-laki. Ibu sekalian yang berbahagia, oleh karena itu sangat penting kita mengembangkan program dan kebijakan perlindungan sosial adaptif yang didasari oleh identifikasi risiko dan kerentanan berbasis gender sepanjang siklus hidup manusia. Hadirin sekalian, perlindungan sosial telah diakui tidak hanya berperan dalam di Indonesia terutama dalam pengurangan kemiskinan, tapi juga pengurangan ketimpangan dan pengurangan prevalensi stunting. Dalam APBN tahun 2023, pemerintah Indonesia bahkan mengalokasikan anggaran 476 triliun untuk perlindungan sosial. Meski demikian, masih diketemukan sejumlah tantangan dalam mengatasi ketimpangan, termasuk ketimpangan gender dalam perlindungan sosial. ILO memperkirakan hanya 30,6% penduduk dunia dapat mengakses perlindungan sosial komprehensif, di mana cakupan perempuan lebih rendah daripada laki-laki. Padahal perempuan memiliki risiko dan kerentanan spesifik sepanjang hidupnya, seperti persalinan dan juga beban kerja perawatan. Tingginya beban kerja perawatan yang tidak dibayar menghambat akses perempuan untuk mendapatkan pekerjaan. Di Indonesia, tingkat partisipasi kerja perempuan jauh lebih rendah dibandingkan laki-laki. Mayoritas perempuan bekerja di sektor informal dan mendominasi pekerjaan keluarga yang tidak dibayar. Ekonomi perawatan menjadi semakin penting dalam konteks peningkatan jumlah lansia, pertumbuhan populasi, dan perubahan struktur keluarga. Selain itu, kerja perawatan juga esensial untuk mempengaruhi kebutuhan kelompok yang memiliki ketergantungan tinggi, seperti anak usia balita, penyandang disabilitas, dan juga lanjut usia. Situasi tersebut menuntut pengembangan kebijakan dan program yang dapat mengurangi beban kerja perawatan yang dialami perempuan, serta mengatasi hambatan perempuan untuk berpartisipasi dalam dunia kerja, seperti layanan perawatan yang terjangkau, mudah diakses, dan berkualitas. Saudara sekalian, pengakuan terhadap kerja perawatan, khususnya kerja perawatan yang tidak dibayar, telah tertuang dalam Sustainable Development Goals target 5.4, namun tingkat tercapainya atau tingkat pencapaiannya di setiap negara ASEAN untuk target pengakuan atas kerja perawatan ini masih sangat beragam. ASEAN telah menyusun ASEAN Comprehensive Framework on Care Economy pada tahun 2021 sebagai bentuk pengakuan dan panduan pembangunan ekonomi perawatan di ASEAN, seperti penyediaan pelayanan publik, infrastruktur, dan kebijakan perlindungan sosial yang berpihak. Kerangka kerja ini mengedepankan keluarga sebagai fondasi ekonomi perawatan. Beban pengasuhan atau perawatan rumah tangga masih timpang, lebih banyak dipikul oleh perempuan karena norma gender yang banyak berlaku dalam masyarakat. Untuk itu, di tahun 2023 ini, Indonesia bersama negara ASEAN juga telah berhasil menyepakati deklarasi ASEAN mengenai kesetaraan gender dan pembangunan keluarga yang akan kita bawa ke para kepala negara ASEAN pada KTT ASEAN ke-43 bulan September ini. Dalam deklarasi ini kami menekankan dan mendorong komitmen ASEAN untuk mengarus utamakan kesetaraan gender serta pembangunan ketahanan keluarga sesuai dengan siklus pembangunan manusia, salah satunya melalui peningkatan tanggung jawab kerja keperawatan bersama dalam keluarga. Mari kita bersama-sama membangun sistem perlindungan sosial yang adaptif, yang responsif gender, mendukung penguatan ekonomi perawatan sebagai sebuah upaya untuk mendorong kesetaraan gender. Indonesia terus berkomitmen dalam mewujudkan agenda ASEAN untuk pertumbuhan ekonomi yang tangguh dan peningkatan kesejahteraan masyarakat di kawasan ASEAN dan di dunia. Saya menyampaikan apresiasi dan terima kasih kepada semua yang hadir, para narasumber, moderator, partisipan yang telah bersedia berbagi pengetahuan dalam forum ini. Sekian terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Muhajir Effendi, for the insightful speech. Before His Excellency Professor Dr. Muhajir Effendi leaves the venue, we would like to request a photo session with all of the participants. The photos will be taken from the stage. Participants, please all stand up and move forward to get your picture taken. Thank you. Satu kali lagi. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please be seated. And thank you very much, His Excellency Professor Dr. Muhajir Effendi. We would like to ask you to kindly proceed to the next venue for the question and answer session with the media. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in this knowledge forum, we are going to have 2 panel sessions. The first panel session is titled Sharing Cross-Country Approaches, which will be moderated by Ms. Della Temenggung from the Australia-Indonesia Partnership for Economic Development, Prospera. This panel will focus on eliciting practices and approaches countries in Southeast Asia has taken to advance gender equality in the labor force participation and ensuring decent jobs for care workers. I would like to invite Ms. Della Temenggung to the stage to moderate the panel session. Ms. Della Temenggung is the Deputy Director of Advisory and Policy at the Australia-Indonesia Partnership for Economic Development. Formerly, she worked as an economist at the Multi-Donor Facility for Trade and Investment Climate, World Bank Indonesia, where she played a key role in programs focused on economic engagement, regulatory reform, investment climate, and trade competitiveness. She also has extensive experience in the area of economic policy, private sector development, and international economics. Ms. Della holds a PhD in economics from the Australian National University. Ms. Della, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Usa, for your kind introduction. Thank you very much, Honorable Professor Dr. Muhajir Effendi, our Coordinating Minister for Human Development and Cultural Affairs. Thank you so much for your inspiring keynote speech and laying out foundation for today's discussion. Professor Muhajir, as my colleague Usa mentioned, my name is Della Temenggung. I'm Deputy for Advisory and Policy for the Australia-Indonesia Partnership for Economic Development, or Prospera. And it's an honor for me to be here. Thank you, Pak Andi and colleagues for the invitation to participate in this very important discussion that the Coordinating Ministry of Human Development and Cultural Affairs is organizing today. So I'm delighted to moderate the first session on sharing of cross-country approaches. So the main objective of this panel session is really to explore strategies and insight related to the gender equality in labor force participation and empowerment of women paid care workers and their families through social protection measures. So one of the key messages that our minister just highlight there, the importance of women in really contributing in their economic participation and how to protect them, also make sure that the risk is taken care. So the session aimed to shed light on challenges and highlight some successful strategies from Indonesia, but also the Philippines, offering valuable insight for creating and implementing effective strategies in this area. So please join me to welcome our esteemed panelists in this session to stage. First, we have Professor Anwar Sanusi. Please, Professor Anwar, the stage is yours. Next, we have Maria Cristina Josefina J. Balmes, or Christine Balmes for short. Silakan, Christina. So allow me to introduce our first speaker, Professor Anwar Sanusi, currently serves as the Secretary General of the Ministry of Manpower. He has an extensive background in policy analysis and public governance, has played a pivotal role in various government agencies. Previous key position is in the Ministry of Village Development of Disadvantaged Region and Transmigration, and have significantly contributed to policy development and institutional enhancement there. So Professor Sanusi has a distinguished career also in academic contribution and holds a Doctor of Philosophy in Public Policy from Saitama University. Yes, thank you. Sorry, Pak. So I think during this first session, let us explore from Professor Anwar Sanusi, the first topic. So this time, Professor Sanusi will talk about advancing gender equality and women's economic empowerment through care economy reforms in Indonesia. You have 20 minutes, Pak.
Yeah.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, moderator. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Excellency, Honorable Ministry of Coordinator, Professor Muhajir Darwin, and Pak Secretary General, Ohayo gozaimasu. Yeah, onajino nani no daikaku sugyoshimashita. Same university from Japan, and then also my senior is I'm very glad today because I met Professor Kosnanto Anggoro. He is one of my give me a lot of inspiration when I was a student in university, and that's my great honors to meet you here today. And then also, ladies and gentlemen, also Ibu Woro. Ibu Woro is a new deputy in Ministry of Coordinator of PMK. Within 20 minutes, I would like to share actually that's very it's a big issue regarding ensuring gender equal labor force participation, challenge and strategy. First, I would like to start with the comparison of the working population of female and male in Indonesia. Next slide. Next slide. Slide berikutnya ya. We know that if we look at the data, this data is I quote from National Statistic, Indonesian National Statistic Bureau. That's in terms of working residents by gender and business. Yeah. You look at that, most of women is working on tertiary or trade and service. But if we look at from a working resident by gender and formal and informal sector, as Bapak Menko mentioned, that most of female are working in informal sector. Meanwhile, for the formal sector, still dominated by the male. And then if we look at more detail about like working resident by gender and skills, the next slide, we look at that the percentage of female workers who work on white collars and gray collar is relatively higher than male workers. Yeah, of course, maybe if you look at like the percentage, still smaller, but most of them are working in the tertiary and then also in white collar workers. As we know, that white collar worker is mostly working in professional staff, technician and the like, administrative, managerial, etc. And then gray collars is sales force, services, business force, etc. And then for the blue collar, mostly is working on the domestic worker, agriculture, forestry, etc. And then we look at of the unemployment. Yeah, unemployment rates actually that's. Next slide, for like the issue regarding unemployment, if we look at from the gender and then also for the age group, that's we look at that's for the young workers, we don't see that's a significant difference. But we look at if for the age 30 years old and over. That the unemployment for the male is still higher than female. So if we look at like the level of education, actually there is also not so big issue, because if we look at like diploma and university almost the same, and then senior high school and vocational school also is same. But if we look at on the junior high school and elementary school, that's the male unemployment is still higher than female unemployment. Look at for the next like the placement. Next slide. Next. The placement of Indonesian migrant workers. This is one of the issue. If we look at if we talk about the Indonesian migrant workers, first in the previous we have like two terms. We distinguish the migrant worker into two words. One is TKW, tenaga kerja wanita, and the second is tenaga kerja Indonesia. So why is TKW? Because I think maybe historically, when we send our migrant worker, firstly we send the women migrant workers. So that is why, in terms of the numbers, the migrant workers, female migrant worker is still higher, than the male of the migrant worker. Now, next, I would like to discuss about the challenge of the female labor development in Indonesia. There are some issues actually that we identify as what the challenges. Next slide. What the challenges of Indonesian female. If we look at like the mega trends. And the COVID pandemic have accelerated the employment change. We know that we already discussed about a lot of issues regarding industrial revolution 4.0 that's shifting, like the kind of employment from the previous are dominantly by the manual, and then now is changed with the artificial intelligence, etc. And then also we talk about the aging, aging, and then also climate change, migration, and globalization, and then also COVID-19. And then next slide. There are some There are some challenge in achieving gender equal labor force participation. This is I think in everywhere in the world, If we talk about the genders equal labor force participation, this is considered as a big issue. So that's why on the G20 countries we already have like a commitment to accelerate the participation of the female workers in the works. As like we know, like Brisbane's agreements on by year 2030, we can reduce the gap of salary, the gap of wage between male and female, and then also fewer opportunities. When have a fewer opportunities than men, women have a fewer job opportunities than men, and this job often come with lower wage and less job security. This is the second issue. And then the third issue is there is a gap in skill and training. Women often lack of skill and training needed to compete for high-paying jobs in male-dominated fields such as finance and technology. And then there is also some factor that contributing to genders inequality in labor force participation in Indonesia. Of course, maybe there are a lot of issues regarding of the contribution for the gender for the women in the labor force. However, at least maybe we can identify the three major issues that is considered as maybe the great contributor for the participation. One is traditional gender roles. Women are expected to prioritize household and child rearing responsibility over their careers. This is, I think, it's not so easy to shifting the cultural thinking about this. Even though maybe we already changed the words, like from wanita, In Indonesia, previous mostly we use wanita. Wanita is coming from the Java language, wani ditoto. So women is only the subject. But nowadays most of we using like perempuan. Perempuan is the basic word is empu. Empu is something it's very high. And then also the second issue is gender wage gap. We still have the problem about the wage in term of the genders. Mostly, except for maybe the people who are working in government sector, if working at company, they got the wage is lower than the male. And then also lack of access to education, including also for the vocational training. This is of the issue of the gender. And then also I just want to give a next slide is next, yes. terus, ya, terus, ya, terus. Sorry. Now, this is some example of the impact of the COVID on women workers in the textile and health sector. Indonesian textile and health sector have more female workers than male workers. The pandemic has had an impact on decreasing orders for textile product due to the closures of importing country borders and the closures of retail stores. Therefore, women workers in the textile sector tend to be more vulnerable and to losing their job or experience reduced working hours. So that's why governments, for when we are facing for the pandemic COVID, and then also after next is when the pandemic almost over, we have the geopolitical situation. So we issue such relaxation in terms of policy for the textile company. And then also there is some of next slide, yeah. Then some issue that's about is patriarchal culture in the workplace. There is a stereotype of the division of the labors based on gender. There are certain jobs that both men and women should do. Yeah, there is maybe a proportion of firm, the data for the figures for the left side. We can see the proportion of firms with women in the middle management and senior management functional areas of result of Indonesia. That's we can look at that for the finance and administration. Still the proportion is very high, yeah. But maybe in the below is getting reduced. There is reflected in the tendency to place women in spot management function, such as finance, administration, human resource, and community relation. Meanwhile, men tend to be a strategic management function, such as research, development, and company profit and loss. There is also next issue that now we are also still have consider one of also the big issue. Maybe last 3 or maybe it's about 3 months ago, yeah. We have a big issue about the staycation, yeah. Staycation is very, as you know, that's in order to get such promotion, they have to be very close with their boss. So in order to, yeah, this is so that's why the issue regarding sexual harassment in the workplace considered still of the big issue in Indonesia. Sexual harassment can be physical or maybe non-physical or maybe in verbal. So what is a government's a policy for responding some issue that I already explained in the previous? Now, of course, maybe for the first, like we have like standard of equality in the world of work, like maybe work-life balance, occupational health and safety with a gender lens, and then also work climate, voice quality, inclusive recruitment, and then also a pay equity. We try to follow all of maybe this norms, this regulation, yeah, in order to so, and then we look at like the policy direction to increasing women's participation in the economic field. First, like protection of women, and then provision of facilities and access that alleviate the dual roles of women, such as increasing gender awareness, prevention of violence against women and children, involvement of men, and balance a division of roles in the household. And then also we increase access to educational, health and leadership services through some activities like educational through formal channels, especially pre-prosperous women. Non-formal education, which includes education in literacy, life skill, critical thinking, managerial and leadership, and health service, family planning, reproductive health, and nutrition improvement. And then also the third, in increasing access and facilitation to economic activities through work skills and entrepreneurship training, financial service, and microcredit, and then also digital literacy and ICT optimization in women business chain. So there is also, I would like to share about what the policy, from the Ministry of Manpower in empowering and protecting women workers. First, that activities to foster supervision of women work norms in the company. And then the national movement for non-discrimination at the work through an IT-based protection system, drafting non-discrimination guidelines and encouraging non-discrimination agreement in company regulation, peraturan perusahaan, or collective labor agreement, perjanjian kerja bersama between employers and employees. And then also carry out development program to expand employment opportunities in the form of labor intensive and entrepreneurship program for female groups. And then opening up equal opportunities and encouraging female to take a part in training and opening measures that are a great interest to female, such as beauty and fashion. I just a bit explain. There is no, That's next slide. Yeah, we all of us maybe knows about Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja. Now is Undang-Undang number 6, year 2023. On the Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja, job creation law, there are the issue regarding the empowerment and protection for female. One is to accommodate flexible working hours, and new forms of relation between employers and workers. So that is hope that more female will be able to enter the labor market and contribute positively to the economy. I think the issue regarding payment based on working hours, not only in Indonesia, due to of the accelerating the utilization of IT, people can work in the one times with many works. And then so that's why through this job creation law, we introduced the payment based on hours. And then the second, Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja also provide many convenience for the medium, small, and micro enterprise sector, which has empowered a lot of female workers. I think learning from the pandemic COVID-19, we can see that for the female is much resilient, much stronger than the male, because most of them are working in informal sector, and then mostly is using the information technology by selling and trading in anything through online shop. And then also Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja provide protection for the rights female workers that existed in the previous law. So the Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja doesn't abolish all the regulation, all the rules that already written on the previous law, Undang-Undang Nomor 13 Tahun 2003. So it is totally wrong if the people said that Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja abolish all the issue, all the norms regarding of the women right. And then within is very, I think I already prepared actually. That's what the classification. Next slide, yeah. Classification of the right of female workers. This like classification of the rights and female worker, and what the detail. The right for the female is the right for the female worker in reproduction, the right of female in occupational safety, health, and keselamatan kesehatan kerja, the right of female workers in female harbors, and the right of female worker in wage system, a lot. And then also there is also a protective policy. Next slide. There is some protective policy during the menstrual rest and then rest before, after delivery abortion. I think maybe we know as also there is undang-undang tentang apa namanya PKS ya, kesejahteraan keluarga PSK ya. Itu juga this is also known as the issue about like the husband leave ya, when his wife is delivery a baby, and then also chance for the breastfeeding a baby, and then also prohibition of employing pregnant female workers or laborers at night. Yeah, this is actually is very clear to give the protection for the female worker. So there is also non-discriminatory policy. Yeah, this non-discriminatory policy, namely is government policy in providing protection for female workers against discriminatory practices and gender. And then also there is a corrective policy. A corrective policy is prohibition of termination female workers due to marriage, pregnant or births. This is corrective of the previous policy is 89. Yeah, we have a correction, and then protection for female workers is correction from the previous undang-undang. And then lastly, yeah, I want to share about what the prevention in the sexual harassment in the workplace. Yeah. Of course, maybe we are very concerned because we are very lucky. Our minister is also Madam Ministers. Yeah. So it's very concerned if we talk about the issue of the gender, especially female, we are very concerned. So when the issue sexual harassment is come up into the public, yeah. So the Ministry of Manpower issue Kepnaker nomor 88 the year 2023 concerning guidelines for the prevention and handling of sexual violence in the workplace. And then also Ministry of Manpower with APindo, Asosiasi Pengusaha Indonesia, and labor unions, tripartite, have declared the prevention and handling of sexual violence in the workplace on the 2nd June 2023 at the APindo building. That's all my presentation. So sorry, maybe I cannot explain in more detail, but I'm very thanks that we have give me the chance to explain about the gender issue of female workers in Indonesia. Thank you very much. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Professor Anwar Sanusi, with very insightful presentation. I think for Indonesia, Pak Menteri, Pak Menko, I think it's very important to understand further because I think you've explained a lot of policies there, Pak, to enhance or increase female labor force participation. But I think for the past, 15, 20 years, we're still struggling to see how we can improve economic participation. I think some of us female here very lucky to be able to do our task here and receive all the benefit that Professor Anwar Sanusi mentioned. We can breastfeed, we can have all the protection. So I think we just need to work harder, Pak, to understand how we can help other colleagues, other female colleagues. That's maybe not there yet, but really important because I think our vision 2045 can only be achieved if we can disentangle those issues, Pak, and bring more economic participation of women better. So thank you so much, Professor Anwar Sanusi, for exploring those and explaining those strategies. Next speaker, allow me to invite Ms. Christine Balmes from Philippines. Thank you so much. That will provide us with examples of, some successful practices that demonstrate how social protection measures in the Philippines are effectively also supporting women paid care workers and their family. So please, Ms. Christine Balmes, the floor is yours. You have 20 minutes to share your presentation.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Good morning, everyone. Before anything else, I would like to thank the Coordination Ministry of Human Development and Cultural Affairs of Indonesia, the National Team for Accelerating Poverty Reduction, or TNP2K, and Prospera, Australia-Indonesia Partnership for Economic Development, for inviting me to share the Philippines' efforts to empower women paid care workers and their families through social protection measures. Next slide, please. So paid work, specifically domestic work, is nothing new in the Philippines. Along with unpaid care and domestic work, it is considered as something that is primarily dominated by women and girls. In fact, in a working paper written by Nicole Ceres for the ILO Special Action Program to combat forced labor, mobilizing action for protection of domestic workers from forced labor and trafficking in Southeast Asia, entitled An Analysis of the Situation of Filipino Domestic Workers, issued back in 2007, they stated that domestic work is both an integral and invisible part of the Filipino society. Integral in the sense that practice of employing domestic help has been embedded in our culture for as long as we can remember and continues to be part of everyday life, and yet invisible as work itself occurs behind closed doors in the privacy of households, with many regarding it as unskilled and women's work. In the same study, which aims to examine the situation of domestic workers both in the Philippines itself and abroad, it noted that even back in 1987, the National Statistics Office, now the Philippine Statistics Authority, estimated that there are 569,000 helpers and related housekeeping service workers in the Philippines, and by 1995, the Labor Force Survey identified approximately 766,200 domestic workers. Meanwhile, the same paper also noted that domestic workers comprise a significant portion of Filipinos who go abroad for employment. I think you are all very familiar with that, with the phenomenon beginning in the mid-1980s, prior to which overseas Filipino worker population mainly consisted of male Filipinos undertaking construction work in the Middle East. But since then, there has been an observed feminization of the Philippines migrant worker population, wherein by 2002, women already accounted for 73% of the total labor outflow, largely attributed to migrant domestic work. Next slide, please. So this sheer number of Filipinos who engage in paid care work cannot be overstated. In recent years, we have found that as of October 2019, there are already 1.4 million Filipinos working as kasambahays or domestic workers inside the Philippines, through a survey jointly conducted by the Department of Labor and Employment and the Philippine Statistics Authority. Next slide, please. So domestic work may help alleviate national poverty by providing an important source of employment and income for the poorest and most vulnerable members of our society, such as women and children in the rural areas. But there are also significant challenges that they are subject to, as reflected in the key findings of the DOLE PSA survey. I will just share a few because I only have a few more minutes. About 4% or 4,500 of the 1.4 million are child domestic workers, 0.4% of whom are below 15 years old, and only 2.5% or about 35,000 had written employment contracts, and 83% were not covered by any social security benefits, among others. All of this on top of the vulnerability to verbal, physical, and sexual abuse, and lack of opportunity for education or self-improvement as housework interferes with these activities. Next slide, please. Meanwhile, the Philippines remains a global outlier in that it has more women than men working overseas. In the 2021 survey on overseas Filipinos conducted by the Philippine Statistics Authority, it showed that 60.2% or 1.10 million of overseas Filipino workers were women, in comparison to men's only 39.8% or 0.73 million. Furthermore, the same survey showed that 64.8% of these women were in elementary jobs such as domestic work. Next slide, please. So migrant domestic work may be a means to contribute economically both within the family and at the national scale, as OFW remittances affect the Philippine economy, but it doesn't remove the risk such as forced labor and trafficking or illegal recruitment, non-payment or underpayment of wages, long working hours, lack of accommodation, insufficient resources, and verbal, physical, and sexual abuse. The isolated nature of domestic work is exacerbated by the disadvantages that come with being in a foreign land, far away from their family members or close friends that can help them when things go awry. Next slide. Given the large number of Filipinos that provide paid care work both locally and abroad, it is only apt that the Philippine government initiates actions and establishes measures to ensure the welfare of paid care workers and their families. Next slide, please. So first of which is the Philippines' ratification of ILO 189 Convention for Decent Work for Domestic Workers, or the C-189 in 2012, as the second country following Uruguay, and as the first Asian country and first labor-sending country to do so. This comes hand in hand with the signing of the law, Republic Act 10361, or what we also know as the Kasambahay Law, or the Domestic Workers Act in the Philippines. This is in compliance with the ratification, and the Philippines passed RA 10361, which importantly bears articles on the following: upholding the rights and dignity of domestic workers, provisions for their protection, among others. Next slide, please. So notably, the results of the previously mentioned DOLE PSA survey revealed the gaps in the implementation of the law. As such, concerned DOLE offices met and committed to look into, first, alternative frameworks for more effective enforcement and implementation of the law given the existing policy on privacy of homes, strategies to ensure and encourage more domestic workers to organize, clearer methodology for setting the sector's minimum wage, and aggressive advocacy initiatives to raise domestic workers' awareness of the said law. Next slide. Moreover, anchoring from rights-based approach, the Department of Migrant Workers, or DMW, sets stricter measures to ensure the safety of our domestic workers. In addition, labor reforms on insurance coverage for domestic and skilled workers, pre-termination clause on transfer or change of employers based on grounds like non-payment of salary, abuse, maltreatment, a more transparent, fair, and amicable alternative dispute settlement mechanism, implementation of the Wage Protection Program, and direct referral of cases involving trafficking and exploitation were jointly adopted by the Philippines and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia through a series of bilateral talks between DMW and the Ministry of Human Resources and Social Development. Next slide, please. And finally, the Safe and Fair Program. It is implemented through a partnership between the International Labour Organization, UN Women, and the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, or the UNODC. Overall, it aims to ensure the labor migration is safe and fair for all women in the ASEAN and in the Philippines. The implementation of the program is supervised and guided by the National Project Advisory Committee, a tripartite plus multi-stakeholder body chaired by the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration and the Philippine Commission on Women as its vice chairperson. Beginning in 2018, the program is officially set to end this coming December 2023. As such, I would like to highlight just a few of the achievements reported as of April 2023. So 25 have been trained, and 22 of which were women, on domestic workers, the gender dimensions, the C-189 and the Kasambahay Law. Awareness campaigns have been conducted on the experiences and views of migrant and local domestic workers on ILO C-189 and the Kasambahay Law, and it reached 1,378 people online. There is also an ongoing partnership with NGOs such as Centro, Learn, IDWF, United, which is a domestic workers association in the Philippines, and the creation of the Pinay Transnational Union of Domestic and Care Workers, which was founded in December 2022, which composed Filipino domestic and care worker organizations and unions based in 8 countries in Asia, including the Philippines. Next slide. And finally, as my presentation comes to a close, I would like to share a few noteworthy practices or valuable experiences, insights, and lessons learned building on the Philippines experience. First is the implementation of initiatives aligned with the 5R strategy to address the imbalance in care work, whether paid or unpaid care and domestic work, is perceived and handled the way that it is because of long-held misconceptions and gender stereotypes on household work, as well as the patriarchal structure that imposes that women and girls must value staying at home and caring for family members and children above anything else. So in order to combat that, the 5R strategy is a valuable tool that encompasses the intersectional issues in care work. In the case of the Philippines, specifically, over the years, we have made countless efforts on collecting and establishing data on care work. From the women's contribution to the economy, the Philippine experience in 1998, to the 2021 National Household Care Survey with PCW, Oxfam, and UN Women, and now the efforts of the Interagency Committee on Gender, Children, and Youth Statistics, which I chair, and the Philippine Statistics Authority to include further substantiate the much-needed data on unpaid care and domestic work through the inclusion of rider questions specifically centered on the number of minutes spent on care work activities in one of the rounds of the labor force survey, which will happen or already is happening because it is included in the labor force survey for August. The Philippines also is championing the equitable distribution of care work responsibilities by challenging social norms that contribute to the burden of unpaid care work through various efforts such as the Expanded Maternity Leave Act, which provides for an option to allocate 7 days of the extended paid maternity leave to the fathers and capacitating fathers to better accomplish their roles and responsibilities at home and in the society. So there is also the family development sessions as part of the Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino program, the amelioration program of the Philippines, which discusses, among others, the responsibilities of the fathers in parenting and their expected involvement in household management and care work. Furthermore, the Philippines already implements programs to invest on time and labor-saving infrastructures and equipment to the different agencies of the government. And to ensure meaningful participation of key stakeholders in the discussions, the PCW also consults and participates in dialogues not only with government agencies but also representatives from the private sector and the non-government organizations. And lastly, the Philippines also works to ensure care workers, whether paid or unpaid, are adequately supported by their employers and communities through laws or policies such as the Barangay Level Total Development Protection of Children Act, which provides the total development and protection of children aged 0 to 6 years old by establishing daycare centers in all barangays or villages, and the Women in Development and Nation Building Act, which states that married persons who devote their full time to managing the household and family affairs are entitled to voluntary social security benefits provided that the working spouse consents to it. Next slide, please. So consistent with the standards as stipulated Under ILO Recommendation 234, the PCW has been lobbying for the enactment of the Magna Carta of Workers in the Informal Economy, or the MACWI, since the 17th Congress in the Philippines. So this is in acknowledgement of the trend that women often make a living through the informal work sector, as stated by Professor Anwar earlier, as it offers them greater flexibility and ability to continue to fulfill domestic duties while doing paid work. So the proposed policy has the following measures: provide a conceptual and operational definition of the informal economy and its components in the Philippine context, recognize the roles and contributions of workers in the informal economy, including the contributing family workers, women involved in care work, and other broad sections and segments of informal workers. So generate data on informal workers for policy making and programming, and promote, protect, and fulfill the rights of every worker in the informal economy to decent work. Next slide, please. This also aims to develop and expand the entrepreneurial potential, creativity, dynamism, skills, and innovative capacities of workers and economic units, and promote gender equality and eliminate gender-based discrimination in entrepreneurship and employment. And finally, I cannot stress the importance of participating in knowledge sharing and advocacy initiatives for care work. Issues on care work is a global issue that cannot be addressed in isolation. As such, it necessitates sharing of experiences and best practices, and taking part in campaigns, and most importantly, sharing of unique data and evidence to inform and aid future initiatives. On our end, the Philippines joined the Global Alliance for Care in 2022 as its first Asian member. We have consistently taken part in various dialogues and fora, specifically discussing care work, such as the Bali Care Economy Dialogue, the Jakarta Roundtable discussion on building a caring economy across ASEAN, and the Regional Forum on Care Work in ASEAN countries. We are also currently preparing to host a local consultation on unpaid care and domestic work in September, jointly organized by UNESCAP and Oxfam Filipinas. So, next slide. In closing, let me reiterate that care workers in the current landscape, whether paid or unpaid, make huge sacrifices that affect their lives significantly. And as it currently is, these are in majority women and girls. Unpaid care work leads to time poverty and interferes with education or economic opportunities in favor of fulfilling domestic duties. Paid care work, on the other hand, is also plagued by the risks that come with the job for very little pay in exchange. Care and domestic work is work, and it is our duty as policymakers, experts, and stakeholders to ensure that this is viewed as such. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Please round of applause to Mrs. Christine Balmes. Very inspiring closing there, Ms. Christine. I think this is a topic that's dear to us, is the care economy and the domestic care workers. We all cannot be here, especially myself cannot be here without those people who's actually very, very important. Oh, thank you. Pak Menteri, silakan.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Minister of Coordinating Minister for Human Development and Cultural Affairs is leaving the room.
All right. Okay, let us continue and come back to our discussion, our panel. I think both of Professor Anwar Sanusi and Ms. Christine Balmes really share very thoughtful, insightful topics and recommendation also around the strategies and the implementation. I think with the Philippines, it's good to hear that ASEAN also has been embarking on the comprehensive framework on care economy, and you've highlighted some of very interesting, important implementation. I think the similar challenge as Professor Anwar Sanusi mentioned also, we've experienced that. I think it's good to see more and more attention to this domestic and care workers and how we can improve their welfare, but also increase their skills. I was about to invite Ibu Woro, but she has to accompany the minister first for the press briefing. I mean, she's supposed to be our discussion for this session. But I guess while we're waiting for Ibu Woro to join us again later, let me invite first question and answer from the floor. I think it's a very important topic to understand here, how we can all together implement this framework on care economy, strengthen our care economy work, and also the broader, as Professor Anwar Sanusi mentioned about the female labor force participation. So allow me to invite, if there is any question, silahkan Ibu, please, if I can have the committee to give the mic. Silahkan Ibu. Thank you so much.
Iya. Iya Bapak. Sudah terlihat ya Pak ya. Terima kasih banyak atas kesempatannya. Perkenalkan, saya Dante Rigmalia, Ketua Komisi Nasional Disabilitas Republik Indonesia. Tidak apa-apa ya bahasa Indonesia ya Ibu?
Silakan Ibu.
Oke. Untuk Prof. Anwar Sanusi, izin Prof. Kami dari Komisi Nasional Disabilitas ingin melihat ya bagaimana perempuan dengan disabilitas dalam posisi pekerjaan dan bagaimana dukungan yang diberikan bagi perempuan dengan disabilitas yang bekerja. Paparan dari Profesor tadi menggambarkan bagaimana dukungan secara umum bagi perempuan ya, tetapi belum tertangkap bagaimana perempuan dengan disabilitas. Kalau kami ingin menggambarkan dukungan bagi penyandang disabilitas diantaranya memang termasuk dalam fleksibilitas waktu, kemudian akomodasi yang layak dalam layanan dukungan, dan ada hal lain yang sesungguhnya akan termuat dari sana. Nah, kami ingin melihat gambaran bagaimana lensa kebijakan yang inklusif. Ketika berbicara tentang perempuan, maka kami berharap bahwa di antara perempuan itu ada perempuan dengan disabilitas, bagaimana dukungan itu dapat diberikan bagi penyandang disabilitas. Kemudian juga bagaimana pemenuhan hak bekerja ketika perempuan dengan disabilitas ini bekerja. Dan untuk Ibu dari Filipina, izin Ibu bagaimana praktek yang baik yang sudah dilakukan di Filipina untuk mendorong pemenuhan hak perempuan dengan disabilitas pada saat bekerja. Terima kasih.
Thank you so much. Terima kasih banyak Ibu atas pertanyaannya dari Komisi Nasional Disabilitas. So let me translate to Ms. Christine. I guess the question is really for Professor Anwar Sanusi to also explain what's the policy that's been implemented to support women with disabilities to also increase their participation in the economic activities. So that's for Professor Anwar Sanusi, but also I guess for you, Bu Christine, to share also the Filipinas experience in this area. Terima kasih Ibu, silahkan Profesor Anwar.
Ya, terima kasih Bu Dian ya. Ibu Dante.
Ibu
ya?
Dante, ya. Terima kasih.
Ya Ibu, saya dengan Bu Dante itu berkali-kali sudah ada kegiatan. Cuman mohon maaf Bu Dante, lupa-lupa terus namanya. Jadi Komnas disabilitas ya. Jadi Bu Dante, saya rasa terkait dengan keterpihakan negara terhadap penyandang disabilitas, termasuk di dalamnya adalah perempuan. Ini dari aspek undang-undang kan sudah cukup clear ya. Jadi dalam undang-undang nomor berapa? Nomor 6 ya, tahun 8 tahun 2016 ya. Itu kan ada ketentuan mandatori yang memang bersama-sama, yakni kita kawal adanya proporsi bagi pekerja penyandang disabilitas, baik mereka di sektor publik ataupun di sektor swasta. Nah, ini kan kita terus melakukan upaya agar itu compulsory-nya, mandatorinya itu bisa tercapai. Untuk swasta itu kan 1%, kemudian kalau publik adalah 2%. Nah, memang tidak mudah ya Bu Dante, saya rasa Ibu juga sudah betul-betul menyelami persoalan. Karena kadangkala ketika kita mau merekrutmen, tentunya kita memiliki kualifikasi. Terutama adalah kualifikasi dasar untuk mengisi lowongan tersebut. Jadi job vakansi kan itu sudah istilahnya sudah ditentukan. Kira-kira di situ kompetensi dasar apa yang dibutuhkan. Yang kadang-kala itu menjadi persoalan ketika kita akan merekrut para penyandang disabilitas. Sehingga kami terutama di Kementerian Ketenagakerjaan, salah satu yang kita dorong itu adalah istilahnya kalau mereka untuk bisa kompetitif, mereka harus ada kompetensi yang dimiliki. Karenanya Bapak Ibu sekalian, pelatihan-pelatihan kami sudah sangat inklusif untuk memberikan bahkan di situ adalah afirmasi untuk penyandang disabilitas mengikuti pelatihan-pelatihan. Terutama adalah pelatihan-pelatihan yang memang diperuntukkan untuk tentunya perusahaan tersebut bisa menerima para penyandang disabilitas. Belum lagi kita juga bicara sebetulnya tadi kan terkait proporsi pekerjaan. Adalah dukungan-dukungan yang sifatnya fasilitas yang memang harus betul-betul ramah terhadap penyandang disabilitas. Saya yakin hampir semua lah kalau instansi publik sekarang itu sudah terkait dengan inklusif untuk pelayanan itu sudah dijalankan. Bahkan mungkin kami pun setiap tahun memberikan apresiasi kepada instansi pemerintah, publik, dan juga swasta yang mereka ini adalah mendukung program-program yang ramah terhadap penyandang disabilitas. Nah, kemudian tadi landscape kebijakan, kemudian pemenuhannya. Ya tadi pemenuhan Ibu Dante ya. Jadi pemenuhan ini memang kadang-kala tadi saya katakan ini relevan dengan tadi adalah ketersediaan orang yang memiliki kapasitas. Sehingga tantangan kita semua mudah-mudahan dengan kita saat ini memberikan ruang terutama pendidikan pelatihan vokasi yang bersama-sama kita jalankan dengan Kemdikbud ini memberikan ruang bagi para penyandang disabilitas. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Pak. Christine, do you want to respond to the question?
Yes. The Philippines passed Republic Act 9277 or the Magna Carta for disabled persons, wherein the National Council for Disability Affairs was created and the Philippine Commission on Women sits as a member of the NCDA. Through this law, we also give 20% discount on basic services for those who have the disability card, which local government units provides. Also, some persons with disabilities receive cash assistance from the government if they fulfill the criteria, like they should be indigent, they should have not the capacity to actually work, or no one from their family is able to provide financial assistance to the person with disability.
Thank you. That's quite interesting. I think Professor Anwar will also in the process of preparing this government regulation who may be able to follow Philippines' trajectory to also support person with disabilities to be able to economically participate. Ibu Woro is back, so allow me to invite or welcome Ibu Woro Sri Hastuti Sulistyaningrum, Deputy for Coordination of Quality Improvement of Children, Women and Youth of Coordinating Ministry of Human Development and Cultural Affairs, to respond to Professor Anwar and Ms. Christine Balmes' presentation. Silakan Ibu.
Okay, thank you very much, Moderator Mbak Dela. Thank you very much for the excellent presentation, Pak Anwar, and also Bu Christine. Thank you very much. I will give a general comment first, and then I will go to the detail. We are talking about gender inequality issues in ASEAN. Yeah. Gender inequality in both economic and political arena is one of the pervasive forms of inequality. Women lack access to equal opportunities of education, healthcare, food, and jobs, having detrimental impact on their lifetime outcomes. In addition to the unequal access to opportunities and income inequality, women also face gender-based violence, discrimination, and disproportional burden of unpaid and low-paid care work. Care work is vital for our societies and the economy. It includes works that we see happening around us in our household. For example, child care, elderly care, care for persons with disabilities, and domestic activities like cooking, cleaning, washing, mending, and fetching water and firewood. Without someone investing time in these daily jobs, communities and economies would grind to a halt. Across the world, not only in Asia, unpaid care and domestic work is disproportionately done by women and girls, especially those living in poverty. They undertake more than 3/4 of unpaid care work and make up 2/3 of the paid care workforce. Demographic, socioeconomic, and environmental transformation are also increasing the demand for the care works, who are often international migrant workers that already mentioned by Ibu Kristen as domestic workers, and also childminders, nurses, and doctors. Gender equality and women's participation in social, economic, political, cultural dimension is an important agenda for ASEAN that we are talking now. And the ASEAN's adoption of Asian Comprehensive Framework on Care Economy in 2021 provides guidance in taking forward this transformation regional agenda, and with Indonesia chairing the ASEAN this year. And we're talking about the Indonesia demography. Indonesia is one of the ASEAN countries with largest working age population, reaching 190 million, around 70% more for the working age population. The high composition of child age population is an investment to realize the Golden Indonesia 2045, and the demographic bonus that already happened in Indonesia is a good opportunity for a country. The opportunity economic growth is getting bigger. However, if the demographic bonus is not prepared and utilized properly, it will bring negative impact, especially social problems such as poverty, low health condition, unemployment, and also high crime rate. And if we're talking about the demographic now, we are in the, younger population, the productive population. That's why this rising demand for care infrastructure and services. So we have to prepare on that, the care infrastructure and services also. The growth of population is in Indonesia should be manageable, and the changes in age structure will in many ways be favorable for more rapid economic development. A report by International Labour Organization in 2022 revealed that 40% of Indonesian women leave the workforce because marriage and childcare and become unpaid care workers. On average, housewives in Indonesia work for 13.5 hours at home, and it is double the average working hours women in the Asia Pacific. And also it's higher compared to men. Yeah. Care is a critical social good and can be a key driver of growth, and greater investment in care services could create more than 10 million jobs in Indonesia according to ILO. So actually there is a lot of policy for gender equality and women empowerment in Indonesia. For example, Ministry of Women Empowerment and Child Protection already developed several policies to promote the empowering of the women. But then, if we are talking about the economic activities, the women who are become the productive, productive. So we have several issues actually. So Indonesia is making progress towards advancing a decent work for women through maternal and child welfare bill. However, current family-friendly provision, example, paid maternity leaves that already mentioned by Pak Sanusi, facilities for breastfeeding, flexible working arrangement that already mentioned also Pak Sanusi, only apply in formal sector. So how about the informal sector? So this is the problem that I think we will face, yeah. Because as Pak Sanusi mentioned, most of the women work in informal sector. So how we have to provide, yeah, the social protection in the informal sector, especially if we are talking about maternity leaves and also the facilities for breastfeeding and so on. So I think this is how to say the issue that we have to face. The second one is about the women who are withdrawing from the employment because they got married or have children. It's difficult to re-enter the job again. So the reskilling and upskilling program is a must because that already happened in Kartu Prakerja. Yeah, they already mentioned also Pak Sanusi, and also vocational training, public vocational training BLK is not directly targeted to that the women who are withdrawing from the job. So I think we should focus more on how we force the women, if they want to enter the job, become our targeted in like Kartu Prakerja and also the BLK. So I think this is the one that that should be taken care after we have discussion now. The third one about the domestic worker that Kristen mentioned. Yeah, Indonesia actually already discussing about the rancangan undang-undang,
the bill, draft law.
Drafting the bill, drafting the bill for domestic worker, but still in the discussion. So I think we should think rethinking and refocusing again about how we have to say promote this law, the bill become the law. And the fourth one is about Indonesia also have a drafting also for regulation on mother and children welfare. SRUU KIA, SRUU KIA, kesejahteraan ibu dan anak. This is focused on the golden period of 1,000 first day of life, and in that law we also regulate about maternal leave, paternal leave, and also how long the mother has to breastfeeding the baby and so on. So I think if we have that law, it will have to say complement the regulation that already mentioned by Pak Sanusi, and also it will have to say give protection for the women. And also Indonesia has like a He4C program. This I think it's already mentioned, Bu Kristen also. The He4C program is and our president became the pioneer of the He4C program, and it's to promote awareness of men. It's not women who are taking care of the domestic works, but also the men also should be involved in the domestic. So if we are talking the women empowerment, it should be men empowerment also. Men empowerment in terms of raising awareness of the men in terms of domestic works. And also, last one, the only one thing. Actually, it's already mentioned by Pak Anwar also about family support program for the desmigrative, ya Pak ya. I think this is a good example how we have to say try to protect the migrant worker who are work in outside our country, but then we also have a family development support. I think this is the same thing that Philippines conducted with the desmigrative. But maybe Pak Anwar should introduce more about the desmigrative, and we try to try to coordinate with other ministries, not only Ministry of Manpower who are involving in the desmigrative, but also other ministries work together to protect our migrant worker. I think this is our comment about what the presentation from Pak Anwar and also Bu Kristen. So thank you very much for the excellent presentation.
Thank you, Ibu Woro. That's the very comprehensive list, 6 topic, I guess, that I think complement but also in line with Pa Anwar Sanusi and Bu Christine. There's also a question, Pa Anwar and Bu Christine, from the Zoom, asking about how government in Indonesia and Philippines tackle also the issues of children left behind due to internal migration. So maybe you can touch base on that in your comment or your response. I also learned from committee, but I'm asking the committee whether we have time for another discussion. Oh, okay. But please provide briefly, Ibu Mira Rianti Kurniasi, Director for Perlinsos from the Ministry of Social Affairs. Is Ibu Mira is here? Or, oh, okay, all right. So let's come back to our panel. Professor Anwar Sanusi, silahkan for your response.
Terima kasih Ibu Mila. Thank you very much. First, I appreciate it's from Zoom, the question is from Ibu Anggi from Universitas Pajajaran.
Betul.
I think in line with the question from the Ibu Deputy, Ibu Deputy, especially on the last comment regarding of family support programs, the Ministry of Manpower, we introduced since almost last 5 years ago, introduced the program that we call as Desmigratif. Desmigratif is a migrative, a productive village, Desa Migran Produktif. This program actually is addressed to the village who are the population majority is to be a migrant workers. I think maybe if you look at the problem of the migrant worker is a lot. We can share maybe the issue with our colleague Christine about the issue. But in Indonesia, for the migrant workers, of course maybe they can get the financial welfare. But they left also a lot of problem, especially for the family, for the children, and then also sometimes even for the husband also is also the problem also for the family. So that's why, and then also when they return back from overseas, sometimes they don't have any information how to use the money. So they always use the money for the consumption. For the consumption. So that's why we introduce such program. We call it as Desmigratif, the acronym. One issue, the Desmigratif, is like the family supportive program. When the mothers leave for the working in the overseas, we through the coordination with the village governance, we introduce, we have trainings, in how to be advisor of this family. Of course, maybe the problem, as Ibu Woro mentioned, we cannot solve by the Ministry of Manpower alone. If we're talking about the migrant workers, we have to talk, we have to coordinate with the other ministers. For instance, most of the migrant workers are from the villages, so we have the coordination with the Ministry of the Village and Transmigration. And then, and then the second is domestic workers. The issue about the domestic workers is a lot, Ibu. Now it's the issue regarding of human trafficking, people smuggling. Also, it's very hot issue. Once we try to improve the governance of the migrant workers, because of course maybe most of us know Indonesia still sending the majority of domestic workers. We are quite jealous with the Filipino because Philippines is most you send is be a skill and semi-skill and skilled workers, but most of us still know sending of the domestic workers. So that's why once of the improving of the governance of the migrant workers, the country of destination should has the law of the migrant worker protection. When they don't have, we should have like bilateral memorandum of understanding that are clearly mentioned about our migrant worker protection, etc.
Thank you, Pak.
And then also the last, I think I'm agrees, Ibu, when maybe for the reasons women's withdrawing from the job for the reason of marriage, yeah. So when they want, after maybe the kids is maybe already past elementary school, they want to get a job. So of course maybe we need to give them to enough skills, yeah. So maybe through the vocational training, or maybe through maybe education through education, yeah, vocational. Yeah. I think a lot of option. I think Ibu Woro also a graduate from Japan. Japan, I think, already introduced such policy by giving like a certain program that are very needed on the labor market.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Terima kasih, Pak. Christine, we have 1 minute.
Yeah, okay,
Please,
1
thank
minute.
you. Silakan.
First,
You
on
can
the
continue.
question on the protection of children who are
Yeah,
left
silakan.
behind, the overseas Filipino workers are required to pay a social security system even if they are working outside of the Philippines, so that their children will have something to receive after an accident or something happens to the overseas Filipino worker. Also, with regards to what Deputy has said earlier, on the upskilling of women who have lost their jobs, the Technical Education Skills Development Authority in the Philippines has a women's center, and part of the women's center, now they are giving skills training free for women who wants to do welding, crane operation, and other technical skills, because in the Philippines, a lot of there are a lot of female welders now that are in demand from companies within the country. So we are trying to protect them in a way that they will not be recruited internationally, but we cannot avoid that because the pay is much higher abroad. So we keep on putting budget so that free training for women to do welding is available to all those who would want to have a new skill or to have a new career.
Thank you, Christine. I guess I think we come to the closing of this session. Let me invite everybody to give a round of applause to Professor Anwar Sanusi and Ms. Christine Balmes. Thank you very much for coming to Jakarta, and let me send it back to USA. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Della Temenggung, for the highly insightful panel on female labor force participation and decent jobs for paid care workers. To the speakers and the moderators, please remain on the stage for a little bit, because we would like to invite Ms. Woro Sri Hastuti Sulistianingrum from the Coordinating Ministry for Human Development and Cultural Affairs to give souvenirs for all the speakers and the moderators. First, Ibu Woro Sri Hastuti will give the plaque to Ms. Della Temenggung as the moderator of the session. Next, Ms. Woro Sri Hastuti will give the plaque to Prof. Anwar Sanusi, Secretary General of the Ministry of Labor. And finally, Ms. Woro Sri Hastuti Sulistianingrum will give the plaque to Ms. Christine Balmes, Deputy Executive Director for Operations on Women, Philippines Commission for Women. Thank you very much to all esteemed speakers and moderator. Please return to your seat. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, now we will proceed to the second panel session of ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community Knowledge Forum on Gender Equality and Family Development, Empowering Equality, Advancing Care Economics, and Social Protection. The second panel will be discussing the advancements and future actions across Southeast Asia. I would like to invite Mr. Elan Satriawan from the National Team of the Acceleration of Poverty Reduction to the stage. Mr. Elan Satriawan is the Chief of Policy Working Group at the National Team for Acceleration of Poverty Reduction, Office of Vice President of the Republic of Indonesia. He is an economist with significant experience in both academic and policy-making areas. In academics, he has done extensive researches covering topics in development microeconomics, particularly in impact evaluation and effectiveness of anti-poverty and social programs. In policy areas, he leads a high-profile government policy think tank to advise the Vice President in taking strategic policy decisions and social development. Mr. Elan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Usha, for very kind introduction. So, well, I think it's still morning before slightly past 11. So good morning, everybody. So I think after we hear the keynote speech from Pak Menko, Pak Muhadjir Darwin, and then we learned a lot from the first session, the speech from Professor Anwar Sanusi and also from Ms. Christine Balmes. We learned that there are still issues that we need to address, particularly on the gender equality in relation with the labor market. Yeah. Not just in Indonesia, what we heard from Ms. Christine Balmes, the same situation actually also experienced in Philippines. We heard also about how each country, Indonesia and then Philippines, address the obstacles, the issues, how to promote the gender equality, how to improve the labor participation, including how to acknowledge actually the domestic labor and promote the care economics. In this second session, today we're going to dive deep on the issue with focus on the Indonesia case, and we're fortunate to have very distinguished speakers, a very best friend of mine, two distinguished researchers in the field. One is Dr. Ririn Purnamasari, and second is Dr. Dia Hadi Stionaluri. And let me briefly introduce you to each speakers in the session. Dr. Ririn Sawa Purnamasari is senior economist at the World Bank East Asia and Pacific Poverty and Equity Global Practice, specializing in poverty, inequality, employment, and gender issues in Indonesia. In addition, she serves as diversity and equity and inclusion representative for the World Bank Indonesia Country Office. Ibu Ririn has also led poverty and inequality programs in Malaysia, previously overseeing engagement in Timor-Leste and contributing to social protection jobs initiative in Philippines and Malaysia. Ibu Ririn holds PhD in economics from University of Melbourne. So I think let's welcome her to come to the stage. As a second speaker, please join us Ibu Diah, we call her Ibu Ruri. So Ibu Diah Hadi Setionaluri, also known as Ibu Ruri. Ibu Ruri is a researcher at the Lembaga Penyelidikan Ekonomi Masyarakat and Lembaga Demografi, both the research institute under the Faculty of Economics and Business University of Indonesia. She's also gender economist at Prospera. Her research focuses on drivers of women economic participation and welfare in Indonesia, examining factors such as gender norms, workplace policy, social protection, and violence against women. Ibu Ruri holds PhD from the Australian National University Demographic and Social Research Institute. So I think we'll give each speakers 20 minutes to present, and then later on we'll have two discussions that will provide the comments to the presentation. So for the first turns, so I give the stage to Ibu Ririn.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Pak Elan. Ini di stage seems like we just become friends of us chatting because three of us already know each other for quite some time. As what Pak Elan mentions, we good friends and also work together. So that's is good. And also thank you for Kemenko and Prospera for inviting me, for having me in this very important discussions about gender and care economy specifically. For today presentations, we'll focus on the case of Indonesia and gonna be more talking about the one part. We're talking about care economy and social protection. I'm gonna talk more about the care economy. And I think Mbak Ruri gonna talk more on the social protection. And also I'm gonna focus on Indonesia, but in some extent I also try to give some example how Indonesia perform relative to other countries, right? How it's Indonesia comparing to other ASEAN member states. So first slide, please. This is about the current Indonesia female labor force participations. I think in the earlier sessions we already heard how Indonesia in related to the female labor force participation, sadly, when we're talking about this number, it's been stagnant for more than 2 decades, right? It's just never changed and low at 50%, and this is like low relative to the regional comparators, relative to the other countries in the region. I think from Philippines going to be so proud of, because Philippines is one of the highest in terms of female labor force participation in the ASEAN member states. Indonesia is kind of in the middle to the lower middle, because above Indonesia, below Indonesia is only Myanmar, I think Malaysia. So it's not really great, and sadly is because this still happen despite the fact that Indonesia be successful in trying to narrowing some gaps in the drivers, supposed to be theoretically supposed to be the drivers of reducing gaps in terms of women in employment between, reducing gap between men and women in employment. So Indonesia already successful in terms of gender parity in education. We know that actually men and women actually now have more or less the same education except on the tertiary level, and then already have some much lower fertility rate, already have increased age of marriage. Before is about about 30% of women aged 25 to 30 that actually already got married. Now it's already only 10%. So it's reduced significantly. But it doesn't pass through or translate it into the increase of female labor force participation. As we see on the left, there is a small graph that try to compare the female labor force participation relative to male labor force participation, both the married and non-married. And as we can see here, there are high numbers of women that actually dropped off from the labor force. And this is happening when they got married and maybe having the children. And also Pak Anwar already mentioned earlier that many women in Indonesia is actually working in low productivity sectors. More in informal work, including unpaid family work. But next slide, please. But actually, the government definitely already realized about these issues, right, for a long time, and already tried to make some commitments, and already reflect that into several documents, including in the RPJMN, and also in the past years, as part of the G20 commitment, would like to reduce the gaps and increase the female labor force participations by 2025 from 52% to 58%, 25% increase. This only 3 years from now. No, not even 3 years, 2.5 years. Right? The challenge is quite big there in our eyes. The other thing is also that's very important is the fact that Indonesia definitely would like to become a high income country by 2045. It means like when trying to be a more developed country, we also need to make sure that we are also inclusive, that many segments of the population will be able to contribute and also to enjoy the growth that the country has. And if Indonesia by 2025 successful in reaching the target of 58% female labor force participations, actually they can help much about the growth, because it means that extra $62 billion going to be added into the growth, and that means that's going to be increase the growth rates by 0.7 percentage point. That's a lot. Simply only from the additional female labor force participation. And definitely the issue about the care economy is become highlighted even further. We already heard about the care economy before the pandemic, but the pandemic really pushed this, become more important issue for all countries around the globe, simply because the impact of the COVID itself. And theoretically, women is going to be impacted worse than men because of the different kind of jobs that women usually participate in, morely in services, for example, that also rely a lot on the face-to-face, physical context, that definitely got a lot of disruptions during the COVID pandemic. And also the responsibility that society usually expect that women should have more responsibility in terms of caring, which is caring of the children, caring of the elderly, caring of the sick people. But the fact from Indonesia, I did research, I did the analysis using the Sakernas, and this is using the Sakernas 2016-2020. 6 months into the pandemic, actually there is an increase in the woman employment. So there is a narrowing gap between men and women employment, but that's only in the first 6 months of the pandemic. I'm still trying to update now the analysis and see if this actually stay or come back to the state before the COVID situations where men and women gap is actually quite huge. But what we need to pay attention here, that I would like audience to pay attention on, is not only the fact that this is the opportunity to increase female labor force participations, but also the fact that not all age group of the women actually increase their participation. Among those that actually decrease, so the rest are increased, among those actually decrease the participations during the pandemic, actually the group of women aged between 19 to 29 years old. And who they are? They are women that usually have children. So they are women that are actually in the early childbearing years, that have to take care of the children. And those that actually participate or enter the labor force, we call it as an added worker effect, which means that they enter the labor force because of a security for the family. Yeah, the husband probably, or the main breadwinners of the household probably have to be out of the jobs. So that's why that anyone in the house have to take care and help to make sure the economy for the house is actually still running. So this is where we call it the added worker effect. And sadly again, even though there are more women that participated in the employment, and many of them actually are those who never worked before the pandemic, these are the low-educated women. And many of them actually working as unpaid workers, and many of them actually in the rural area in the agricultural sectors. But nonetheless, this is still one step ahead that I think we never expect before. After 6 months after the recovery, we also do the high frequency survey that trying to monitor how the impact of the pandemic throughout the period of the pandemic, and how the dynamics of the labor force during that period. And unfortunately, when the economy start getting better, when men start getting back to job, women is not that fast come back to job again. So for those who you initially worked during before the pandemic, not necessarily come back to job after the economic situation get better. So this another, two sides of the coins, right? I mean, like good and bad at the same time. And then now it depends how well we all see this is an opportunity or become a curse of the pandemic. So this is the reasons why I would like to set the presentation today and trying to focus more on what we call it work-care nexus, the linkages between the work, the employment, and the caring responsibility. What we already hear many times, I think, is when we're talking about the caring, it's always like the situations where there are many women have to be at home to take care of the children simply because there are not enough or not adequate child care services in this country. Not only the numbers, but also the quality. Not only the number and the quality, but also the price, the cost, whether it is affordable or not. And we know that definitely all of you, the mothers here, will not drop your kids in the just simply a child care if the quality of the child care is not good, right? But if you want to drop your children in the good child care, apparently not everyone can afford that. So this is the current situations that Indonesia face. Child care provision is still concentrated in unpaid family arrangement, in informal care, and even if there are some good, it's not affordable for many, and those are actually like poor family who usually have to bear the cost more than the richer one. The other part, the reasons why the limited numbers of this quality affordable childcare is also the fact that the government currently is not spending enough to support the childcare and pre-primary education. And we always try to aim to compare with OECD, the developed country. If we compare with the OECD country, Indonesia only spends 0.04% of GDP for the childcare and pre-primary education, compared to OECD that are up to 0.7% of the GDP. As I said before, is it Indonesia alone who experience this? No, because many other countries in the ASEAN region is actually also face the similar thing. If you see on the graph that I put there on the slide, we see that many of them actually still facing the issues about women exiting the job because of responsibility for caring. But at the same time, there is limited numbers of qualified, affordable childcare. One example is here in Cambodia. This is the old data that I got, but actually still valid until now. The fact that many of the childcare is actually only allocated in the one room of the pagoda with the very limited services and facilities, including water. This is sad, right? How can you provide a good quality for child care if you not even be able to provide a proper room with even enough water, right? So as I said, yeah, I mean, good thing is this Indonesia is not alone, but it is still sad, for the ASEAN countries where we have to all facing the same issue like this. The other thing that we also already heard for long, the issue for the work-care nexus, the linkages between the woman working and the responsibility is because of the social norms. So the Indonesia social norms in many of the adat actually tend to see that raising the children is responsibility, solely responsibility of the mother, not even like sharing the responsibility, right? Even though now it's starting getting better, there are some that already start seeing the responsibility for caring and domestic work can also be shared. Pak Elan, do you do something at home? Helping your wife? Of course. Eating. To eat the food that your wife cook. But I mean, at least this is good. I mean, good sign, especially in the urban area in Indonesia. They now start many sharing responsibility between men and women, between father and mother when raising children. But again, the issue about the social norm is not only in Indonesia alone. Vietnam, for example, that also have one of the highest female labor force participation in the region, also still facing such of the social norm. Not only the fact that it happens when women is already get married, but actually perceived responsibility. You know that woman one day when you get married, you need to take care of your children. Started when during they still at school. So I did the qualitative study a couple years ago and have a discussion with boys and girls from high schools in some areas in Java. And sadly, many of them still think that actually, yes, when we grown up as a girls and grown up, I know that after I got married, I'm gonna need to take care of my family. So I don't think that I need to choose the subject or school that, like high competitive kind of the subject or school, because at the end I will not work anyway. Or at the end I was going to be just selling food at home or doing some informal work. So it started early when they're still high school. Sad, right? This is something that we also need to be aware of as well. And then the other thing is not only the fact that this is about the responsibility, but the fact that when many people still see that work woman is actually additional. They don't see that this is one of the important or become the breadwinners of the household, of the family, but become an additional for the other person who also work and maybe more responsible to be the breadwinner of the family. This also have a bad impact, because women might not have an opportunity to compete in the quality type of job is the same as men, even though we have the same education. At the same time, system itself also sees that way. Again, I also get surprised when I joined the focus group discussion during the study in Central Java, and I meet with the employers, and the employer is actually a woman, right? And then she owned the company, and she said, yeah, I do not increase the salary of this woman because I know that she might not be needed as more as the other my male employee. So that's sad. No, she's woman. She owns the company, but she also sees that way. So this is already deep inside in some of the people mind, and the perceive that actually the society will support this is wrong, right? And this is something that later on I'm gonna also show that Mbak Ruri here actually did experiment that actually the perception is actually not correct, yeah. But again, this is not only happen in Indonesia. This is also happen in other countries as well, in our regions, yeah. That the perceptions about men is needed more on the job than women. This actually also even in Malaysia or even in the Philippines, in Singapore, still view this way. So while we also know that early investment in child care is definitely, benefited not only for the woman itself, not only for the children, but at the end it's also for the economy. It's for giving an opportunity for better employment for women, and then once the family also have more income, definitely going to be a more welfare, a better welfare in the household. The child care itself, if it is qualified, if it is in a good quality of the child care, definitely going to help improve the child development outcomes. This is definitely already proven by several studies. And at the end, it's going to be increase the productivity and economy and growth as general. Next slide. But having a good quality childcare is actually, it's not difficult, but it's also not easy, because there are a lot of options. There are a lot of choices about what kind of the childcare services that can be provided. Can be, home-based care, can be facility-based care, can be in terms of informal arrangement. But there are definitely a lot things that need to be worked together, which is I provided in the next slide. That not only from the supply side itself, but also from the demand side, and also from the policy, from the regulation. I already list here in the presentation number of the issues from the supply side, but also on the demand side and the public policy regulation. One component that I would like to highlight here is the very important thing to touch base on the social norm itself. In the next slide, I said that shifting social norm is very critical, not only like the social norm about, that women should be able to join the employment if they want to, right? They should be given the same opportunity as men. But also norm about being a good mother, right? I mean, there is very common that people afraid to put their children in the child care because they are afraid to be seen as irresponsible mother. It is not true, because actually you given a better to the children if the child care itself is qualified. And what I mentioned earlier, shifting social norm, it's not easy, it's very difficult, but there is a recent study from Mbak Ruri here that actually showing trying to do the correcting of misinterpretation. So starting from correcting misinterpretations is a good starting point to start shifting the social norm about how important for women to participate in the economic activity, and how to make sure that putting children in a good quality child care is actually also benefited for the children, for the human development as well. So I think that's it, Pak Elan. I hope it's useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ibu Ririn. So give her a round of applause. And I thank her actually, it's not just because she spent like about 20 minutes of the allocated time, but I think she shared about very insightful discussion about what is the problem in this in the gender equality, in the female labor force participation. She mentioned about that not just Indonesia but also countries in the region, in the ASEAN, spend relatively still small on the efforts actually to promote the female labor force participation. She mentioned also about two main obstacles related with the still relatively low female labor force participation. One is the social norms, and second is the quality and affordable childcare. And I think that's part of it will be discussed further by our second presenter, second distinguished speaker. And I think without further ado, I'll let Ibu Ruri actually to share her perspective and her insight about the topic. Silakan.
Thank you, Pak Elan. Thank you for the opportunity given to us. And before I start, I would like to thank Usha and Kemal for preparing the materials for today. I think my presentation is a follow-up to Ibu Ririn's presentation that discussed about female labor force participation situation in Indonesia, and also introducing the work care nexus that already been in a discourse in Indonesia been so far. So next slide, I will start with a little bit overview of current landscape of women's economic participation in care economy in Indonesia. A lot of this has been discussed by Ibu Ririn, so I can speak briefly about this. Next slide. So as you've heard from Ibu Ririn, we've seen a progress in gender equality, particularly in education. There is a closing gap especially in enrollment in tertiary education. We've seen that more women are enrolling in tertiary education compared to men. But however, this hasn't been translated into closing gender gap in the labor market. So we've seen, Burin actually mentioned that we have a stalled labor force participation for female for almost 2 decades at 50%. And also we've seen that Indonesia's labor force participation for female is actually quite low in Southeast Asian countries. Next. And this is also going into more detail that female labor force participation rate is lower than male for across, level of education, and it still also exists even among those with educated. And the largest gap occurs among those with senior secondary education, but then the gap is narrowed when in the higher level of education. And Burin also mentioned that one of the reasons why there is a low female labor force participation is there is a low participation among married women with young children, because women tend to exit from work after they got married and have the first child. And we've seen that on the right panel, female labor force participation rate is stalled at age 20-30 at childbearing age. And a recent study suggests that women's probability to return to work is actually quite low up until the child is enrolled in primary school. But again, when women try to return to work, they face skill atrophy that continue to limit their ability to return to work or obtaining jobs with decent paid and also secure condition. Next slide. Now, I think similar to the rest of the world, there is a huge gender gap in unpaid care and domestic responsibilities, as previously mentioned by Burin, and this is closely linked to a low female labor force participation. Our calculation shows that in Indonesia, around 78% of women aged 15 and older engage in domestic work, and this is like 3 times of the rate of men's. And unpaid care and domestic workload, when properly measured, shows that women actually work long hours. We add paid and also unpaid work, and it's diminishing the availability for paid work and perpetuating gender disparities and economic opportunities. Our Prosperous pilot studies on time use agency survey in 2 largest metropolitan areas show that in general, women work longer hours, like 11.8 hours, than men, which is the average is 8.2 hours, if we account for unpaid domestic and care work. And women with young children, age 5 and below, who are actually at their productive age, spend a longer time for unpaid work, more so than men and women in average. And we also did a calculation that on average, an increase in 1 hour of unpaid work is associated with a decrease in women's probability to be employed by 4%. So, and to balance this work and care requires a continuum of policies that support childcare related leave and services. ILO estimated that childcare policy gap, or this is equivalent to the time lag between the end of paid leave after childbirth to age when children start attending childcare services or primary school, is around 6.7 years for Indonesia, and this is higher than global and Asia Pacific average for around 4 years. Now, the next slide we will see why we have such a big gap, and in this next presentation I will highlight this biggest challenge in care economy, particularly for the low-income families. Next slide. Now, in Indonesia, a challenge related to work-care nexus is quite evident. If we see the low and unequal enrollment rates in early childhood education and care for children below primary school age. Prospera analysis of Indonesia National Socioeconomic Survey shows enrollment stands around 73% for 5 to 6 years old, but if it goes from right to left, but it declined significantly to 21% for children aged 3 to 4, and only a mere 0.9% for children aged 0 up to 2 years old. And if you see across age group, enrollment is relatively higher among children for wealthy families as compared to those from the poorer backgrounds. And this graph, this one graph can tell many stories. So I think two things come up from here. First is the very low enrollment rate of children aged 0 to 2 years old shows that many women with young children have to be out of the labor force because they have to take care of the children. And this is related to Ibu Ririn's mention about strong norms that care continue to become the mother's sole responsibility and still cannot be shared. And second, this graph shows that current investment probably still focus on early childhood education, as reflected in higher enrollment among children aged 5 to 6 years old, but not simultaneously on early child education and care for the earlier years. So we see that in Indonesia there is a gap in the continuum of care where there's supposedly higher enrollment in the early years of children, and this is something that we need to think about how to close it for improving welfare of children and also supporting women to participate more in the economy. Next slide. From Prospera study, also show that when the child care services are available, this existing child care continue to be unaffordable, particularly for the low-income earners. So we did a survey to daycare center in Jakarta and Surabaya. So fees charges by daycare in Jakarta amount for around 46% of the provincial minimum wage, and it's also equivalent to 54% of the poorest quintile's monthly household expenditure. While in Surabaya, it's a bit lower, so childcare services slightly more affordable, with the average monthly cost of being roughly 22% of the provincial's minimum wage. What is affordable in this case? We use the OECD and also US Department of Health and Human Services as a standard. For OECD, childcare is called as affordable if it doesn't cost families more than 10% of incomes, while the US Department of Health and Human Services said that if a family should not spend no more than 7% of their income for daycare. So as you can see, the cost in Jakarta and Surabaya is far above 10% and 7%, and this means that these are, very unaffordable based on this recommendation. And also many childcare centers, childcare facilities that Prospera has interviewed cited that there are financial constraints among top operational challenges, especially to pay salaries for staff, teachers, caregivers, and also to cover the cost of utilities, rental, purchase toys, etc., and also to improve overall state of the services. So even at high price, as reflected in the graph, these facilities, the available facilities still operate at very thin margin. And next slide. Now, move on to the next key issue is the challenges that faced by the paid care workers. Next slide. Perhaps we all know that there's low compensation for workers working in the early childhood care, particularly sector. So in Indonesia, care sector already employs around 7 million, and this number is expected to grow to 32 million by 2030. The ECEC sector is highly feminized. 9 out of 10 teachers or caregivers are women. And although this is presenting an opportunity for women's employment, but the challenge remains in how to provide, quality work and decent work for the caregivers. Most of the current services of ECEC are non-formal or community-based, and teachers and caregivers are not entitled for equal pay and good working conditions. Our estimates show that public funding remains limited. Only 0.033% of GDP. If we compare it to countries in OECD, they allocate an average around 0.7% of GDP for such purpose. And most of the funding is concentrated in early childhood education and not simultaneously on care. Public spending empirically has been shown that it's essential to support female labor force participation. And in OECD countries, the larger share of public spending is associated on family benefits is associated with higher female employment. Next slide. This is also something that we all probably know, that domestic workers, we've seen that a lot of families in Indonesia rely on domestic workers as quote-unquote substitute for their role to do domestic work. So this is showing you that there are many domestic work, but actually more can be done to provide the domestic workers with more decent jobs. So this is old estimation by BPS that there were 4 million of domestic workers in Indonesia, and the majority of them are women, and concentration are in Java Island. And they have poor terms and condition of work. My own calculation in using labor force survey in 2019 shows that the female workers' average wage is below any provincial minimum wage. And also these domestic workers are actually very small of them covered with the social insurance. Next slide. Now, Anwar Sanusi has mentioned about the migrant workers. So we've seen that international migrant workers working in domestic and care sector are largely exposed to precarious jobs. And we've heard from Pak Anwar Sanusi that women are the majority of Indonesian migrant workers, and 45% of them are working in jobs related to care and domestic work. 77% of the migrants work informally in 2021, and there's a worsening outlook since COVID-19. And this means that there's an increased precarious work condition for this group. Next slide. What can we do next for this addressing unpaid care work and providing decent paid care work for many of them who rely on this sector? So I will discuss a little bit about role of social protection. Next slide. In Indonesia, we've seen that actually there are many promising changes are currently on the horizon. At the policy level, Indonesia elevated care economy as a policy priority in G20, Bu Ririn mentioned, and also its National Development Plan. Ministry of Women Empowerment and Child Protection is now developing a roadmap for care economy, prioritizing investment in infrastructure and caregiver rights. Indonesian Parliament is also deliberating 2 pieces of legislation, Domestic Workers Bill and Maternal and Child Welfare. And the first aim to guarantee decent work for domestic workers, and the second one seek to extend paid maternity leave to 6 months and paternity leave to 40 days, and require public facilities and workplaces to provide childcare. And there's also initiatives from private sectors that they show interest in expanding accessible and affordable care services for the staff and for border communities. Next slide. Now, one way to ensure the well-being of women across different phases, across their life stages, is through the framework of social protection. There have been many ongoing initiatives, but there are also spaces for enhancing these endeavors further. I think for all life stages, we've seen a program like PKH or Family for Hope that covers household at the bottom of 25% with cash assistance, provisional cash assistance for families with these children, persons with disabilities, seniors, and pregnant women. We have BPJS Kesehatan or public health insurance that provide low fee or free healthcare services, although we still see a gap for women covered in this health insurance. And in each life stage, there are things that we can do to improve. For example, during early childhood or children when they're at school age, one thing that we can do is ensuring that triple benefit from affordable and accessible quality childcare services, that is providing care on top of the early childhood education that already exists. And also for during the work life stage, the room for improvement aside than what already existed now, like maternity leave, kartu prakerja, and also public workers insurance, there are also a venue to fill in that is guaranteeing transitioning from education to job, and also tailoring support for women particularly that have career interruption, and to help them to transition smoothly back into the labor market. Aside then, we have to also expand the coverage for informal workers, enforcement, and also thinking about the contributory system of social protection to support, to fill in the gap in this life stage. And for the old age, there's one thing that sometimes often left out from discussion is ensuring the caregivers' economic security and the old age. Caregivers, who are majority of women, they're dedicating their time throughout their life. They have to be out from the labor force to provide care, and then it means that they've lost income and they do not, this is limiting their participation in like old age insurance, etc. And we can, in this case, expanding social protection for women at the old age will help to address this precarity during this stage. Next slide, the last one. And protecting, we can also learn from the Southeast Asian peers in elevating care-responsive policies. Indonesia can learn from other countries that have progressive set of policies to redistribute women's care and domestic responsibility, and also to boost women's economic participation in their respective countries. For example, Malaysia, they've been doing redistributing care and domestic responsibility at home, and boosting female labor force participation by building childcare, providing childcare support, employer incentive, and also providing childcare subsidy. Singapore, they provided childcare leave and also subsidy, and also Vietnam, there's an effort to harness public and private resources to make care accessible by providing paternity leave and ECEC allowance, and also engaging with employers to provide support for women who need space for breastfeeding, and also those who need in covering the childcare costs. By that, I'm ending my presentation. Thank you so much, Pak Elan.
Thank you very much. Let's give applause to Ibu Ruri. So I think Ibu Ruri offered very insight analysis on the detailing and following up what Ibu Ruri mentioned, that there is a problem in the both demand side and supply side of the care economy, in particular the child care that Ibu Ruri mentioned as one of the main problem in promoting the female labor force participation, which is the unmet need of the quality and affordable child care. I think it's it's also interesting how social protection actually can be part of the solution to address the issue of the problem in the promoting of the care economy, and as also a solution to promote the female labor force participation. I think we have two discussions. They both already here. First is Professor Nunung Nuryartono. Professor Nunung is Deputy for Coordination of Social Affairs Improvement here at the Coordinating Ministry of Human Development and Cultural Affairs. And second, we have Dr. Dinar Dana Karisma. He is a Senior Planner at the Ministry of National Development Planning, Bappenas. I give the first opportunity to Prof. Nunung. We have only like 3 maximum to 5 minutes, Prof. Nunung. Okay, so let me then give the opportunity first to Pak Dinar then, since Prof. Nunung need to take the call. Okay, please Pak Dinar. So 3 to 5 minutes. Okay.
Thank you. Mohon izin Pak Nunung. Mohon izin Bu Lisa. Thank you very much Pak Elan, Mbak Ririn and Mbak Ruri for a very enlightening explanation and presentation. This is something that has come to our attention too in Bappenas, and hopefully we can move together to resolve the issue. My first response would be that we have found similar findings actually. My work mostly is now with the older population, and we see similar patterns that about 10% of older people now in Indonesia are in need of caregiving. And when we further see into the data, we found that 70 to 85% of caregivers to older people are usually women in the family. They can be their children or other female family members. And based on our data collection in 2019 for Silani, we collected data in 7 villages in Jakarta, Yogyakarta, and Bali. We found that 70 to 80% of the female caregivers to the older people, they are high school graduate, and about 5 to 10% they are university graduates. So this is, and they have to provide full-time, they have to do the caregiving job full-time, so they no longer active in the labor force. So this is to strengthen what already found by Mbak Ririn and Mbak Ruri, but on the other hand, we can see that the problem is probably much bigger, that the responsibility, quote-unquote, for women to provide care works in the family is not only for children, but also for vulnerable family members, like older people and people with disabilities. So to provide better care to people, to vulnerable people, I think it should be something that move toward a more inclusive side, not only providing childcare but also securing care for other vulnerable population like people with disabilities and older people to create more impact. Because we are moving toward aging population. Currently we only have 10% of older population, but in about 20 years we will have 20 to 25%. So if we don't change the way we provide care for now, for both of children and older population and also people with disabilities, then probably we will have problems in the future as well. So the progress that I can share here, that care economy has been included into planning documents. The latest draft of the long-term development planning has been including care economy. It is mentioned explicitly, but the homework for us is that the long-term development plan is a very general document in the level of law. So we need a stronger implementation framework on how we want to develop this care economy and provide better opportunity for women in the labor market. So I agree that the the solution is to improve care work, to formalize. One is to formalize care work, to start seeing care works as a part of the productive economic activities, not a residual activities that is seen as a responsibility rather than productive actions. So this will include to make care work to be more decent, inclusive, and also to secure the earning received from the care work. I think in here the government has a very significant role to support toward that direction. One is to subsidize or create programs that encourage the availability of childcare, but also to create social protection that provides benefits for care works. Long-term care insurance, for example, for older population and for people with disabilities will create demand and ability to pay for older people and people with disabilities for care work. And this way we can start creating a new sector, maybe not new sector, but a sector that we have been neglecting so far and seeing it as not as productive as the other sector. Another thing that we need to think is that the reliance of family to family care workers and mostly women in the family is still quite strong. So the way we think about who should do care work in the family, I agree that this is something that we need to change. But on the other hand, we probably need to also see how we can make this better, how we can support care workers in the family to be able to actually do the care works in a better way. Maybe some capacity buildings is needed for them to be able to provide better care, for example, for older people and people with disabilities as a first step to formalize what they do. In the developed world, we can see that even care workers in the family, they can be paid by the government. This is probably still a long way to go for Indonesia, but to standardize the way we do care works in the family, I think this can be the first step toward that direction. The last thing maybe we need to rethink about the way we conduct our social systems. PKH has been mentioned by Mbak Ruri as one of the program that is providing security for women in the family, but also since it has conditionality, it's kind of assert the role of the women to provide care to the family, because they will receive the money, they will also have to enforce the conditionality, and they will be the one who will be asked by people when the conditionality is not met. So this is something that probably we need to rethink and make it consistent if we want to develop care economy and better work opportunity, formal work opportunity for women. I think that will be all for now, Mas Elan, from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Mas Dinar, I think for very important insights on the adding to the what have been presented from our speakers. Pak Nunung already been back to the room, so Pak Nunung, please, if you have some comments to offer, around 3 minutes, Pak, if you may.
Thank you so much. Check. Thank you so much, Pak Elan. Congratulations, Bu Ririn and Bu Dia. Very insightful presentation based on the research that you've conducted through comparison, not just only in Indonesia, but also in other countries within ASEAN countries. My comment is that there are at least two important terms that we have to agree on related to the inclusiveness. Because inclusiveness is very important since we have many potential opportunities for women actively involved in economy. And a second term that we also have to discuss, globally actually we already agree to implement the SDG, where number 5 is related to gender equality. The problem is that how we can prepare the ecosystem to give more participation for the women actively involved in the economy. And another interesting issue is related to the childcare, early childhood education. It is also needed by the government if government would like to direct involve to provide the facilities and infrastructure for childhood education. If it is yes, from which point the government can start? And then related to the social protection, since the Coordinating Ministry for Human Development and Culture already provide the cycle of human development starting from prenatal until elderly. So social protection ideally should cover from the prenatal stage up to the elderly stages. I would like to know more how the Indonesian social protection so far already cover this issue related to the not just only what just I've discussed, the cycle of human development, but in which point then the government can provide the social protection, particularly for women as well as the disabled women who actually they able to participate in economy. Last one, when we look on the 5R framework, starting from what we call it reduce. I have to take my note. I really wait a minute. Yeah, what I mean is how can we use 5R framework to build a good ecosystem for the care work as well as care economy. I think that's all my point, Pak Elan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pak Nunung, for direct and important points that you raised to the two presentations. I think before I let the speakers actually to respond to the comments from the two discussions, since we are running out of time, so I'd like also to combine if there is some question from the audience. I know there is one from the Zoom, but I give a one or two question from the audience. Any? No? Well, lunch still can wait. But, okay, so if not, then I'll read the question from the Zoom. Hello, I'm Deden from the IPB. Thanks for the insightful presentation. I'm interested with the socio-cultural issues related to care economics. As we know that many women are reluctant to enroll their children into childcare due to the trust issues and social norms. Mothers, especially single mothers, are afraid to get stigmatized further if they leave their children in the childcare. The question is, how do we promote the use of childcare in our society? Can we make it as an additional benefit to the current social insurance? Thank you. So I think I give first the opportunity to Ibu Ririn and then Ibu Rory to respond to the comments from the discussion, but also the question from the Zoom. Please.
Thank you, Pak Elan. So thank you, Mas Dinar and Pak Nunung for the comments. I think I cannot say that I more than agree than to you both about what you raised on the importance of trying to see not only the care, when we're talking about the care, not only about the child care, but I think we also need to prepare early now. The fact that even though now we are not one of the country in the region that is not aging yet, but actually we nearly aging. So I think we have to get ready now. So when we're talking about the care economy, I think it's not only about child care. Yes, my presentation today is only focused on the child care, but actually we realize that when we're talking about the care economy, have to be more comprehensive. So it's not only about the only children, but also about the elderly and also about the disability and even for the sick people. It's also part of the care economy as well. Also Pak Nunung, in terms of the way how, as I mentioned earlier, if Indonesia really want to be the high income country, developed country, when we talking about growth, more growth, we need to be inclusive. Inclusive here is not only about try to make sure that everyone can benefit from the growth, but everyone also given the opportunity to be part of the growth. So it need to be considered there. And one of that actually currently still being lagging is the opportunity for women to participate in economic activity. So this definitely also relate with the SDG that you mentioned. We also need to make sure that we reach the target of the SDG. It's not long for us, especially as I already mentioned in our presentation earlier, we only have 2.5 years if you want to try to reach the G20 target of 58% of the female labor force participation. Related to your question, Pak Nunung, about where the government need to start, actually the government doesn't need to start by itself. I think usually what we do is the government also need to work together with all the components of the society. So this also include the private sectors, Pak. So we know that there are many formal workers working in the office, right? So when talking about the providing child care, it's not only solely the responsibility of the government to provide good quality and affordable child care. There also can be started by the private sectors. So the firm, the offices can also provide the child care, but with support from the government. So the government can provide incentive, Pak. So it's not only government itself is going to do it themselves, but working together with private sector and providing incentive, mengurangi pajak, memastikan bahwa ada beberapa komponen dipermudah, Pak, surat-suratnya dipermudah, ya, to make sure bahwa proses untuk establishing child care is easy, bureaucratically. So this is something that actually need to be worked together. It's not only solely the responsibility of the government, but the government can start from that. So providing incentive is something that's not impossible. Something that actually very doable and can be done it very relatively quickly. So this is one of example. Maybe later Mbak Ruri can have more example of that. The other thing is also in terms of community, Pak. Because there is one study that actually we also did using the data dari PODES. Showing that actually community level kind of child care, it's also useful in helping mother to have more time to be able to participate in the economic activity. So when you also include the people in the village, in the community, train. So the mother there also been properly trained to make sure that they can also provide, local context kind of the child care, but still in a good quality. That's not only providing opportunity for women that need to do work outside home, but also those that actually maybe have limited choices or limited opportunity. They can also provide the help in terms of the local child care, but still can earn money. So ini juga related to what Mas Dinar mentions about trying to see the child care activity is part of the care economy, also seeing as part of the productive activity and can earn money from contributing to that. So that's my response, and I'm sure that Mbak Ruri might have more things. Should I also directly that? Yeah. I mean, this is exactly what I mentioned earlier. No, the questions from Pak Deden from IPB asking about the stigmatized of especially for single mother. As I mentioned earlier, trying to shift the norm is not easy. It takes time. Itu sudah ada di akar budaya kita sudah lama sekali. Jadi it's gonna take quite some time to do it. But what I also mentioned, Mbak Ruri and the team, including with the World Bank, we did the study using the online survey and showing that actually one step to do that is try to make sure that they have the correct interpretation about the support system. So people might think that if I put the children in the child care, people gonna see badly. Actually, it's not necessarily like that. So that's the perception of the person itself. Starting from correcting the perception is one step before start shifting the social norm. So ini sudah ada studinya. Jadi it's not just something that actually is not proven. This is already there. And actually it's very simple intervention, very simple and cheap intervention that actually the government and other society also can start doing. So this is something that I could respond to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mas Dinar, and also Pak Nunung for the comments. I think I'm echoing Mbak Ririn that I agree that yes, our presentation was only covering mainly for children, but I agree that as Indonesia is going towards aging population, we need to start thinking about how to provide care, and for the elderly, also people with disabilities. But also sometimes that we forgot is that providing also ensuring the welfare of the caregivers themselves. So I think I've mentioned in my presentation, one way that we can do is to think about social protection schemes, obviously probably to have a more co-financing system that will not, memberatkan beberapa pihak, begitu ya, that actually can help this both the one that needs care and also those who provide care with a better, protection and reduce the precarity in the both in the old age. And also, Pak Nunung mentioned about 5R. I have also Pak Nyontek. We can obviously use this 5R: recognize, reduce, redistribute, reward and represent care work, unpaid care work. I think related to what I mentioned before, that the caregivers are the one who actually sometimes we forget about them, because we think that care work is, particularly the unpaid care work, is something that is not important, and we need to start to think that unpaid care work is actually, without them running behind, kalau nggak ada yang masak, kalau nggak ada yang provide care buat anak-anak dan elderly, I don't think we can sit here, right, and listening to the presentation. So I think we need to switch our thinking also, that we need to recognize that care work, unpaid care work particularly, is actually important, and that's why we need to think about the next step strategies to provide them with better protection in the future. Now I'm going, because Mbak Ririn mentioned many times about social norms study. So maybe briefly, so what this is a study that done by Lisa Cameron, Diana Contreras Suarez, and myself, and the study was actually intervening misperception about social norms related to women's economic participation. So we actually surveyed women and men and asked them to estimate how much women and men in that have the same characteristic like you, berapa banyak laki-laki dan perempuan yang kurang lebih karakteristiknya sama dengan ibu dan bapak sekalian, yang tidak setuju dengan perempuan untuk bekerja, dan nomor 2 adalah tidak setuju dengan atau setuju dengan laki-laki melakukan tugas childcare. So we've got actually a survey that asked about the misperception, and we also did the survey to ask about the actual support. Now, the misperception is actually overestimated or underestimated. So actually, what people think about others is actually too much, ya. Jadi kita berpikir bahwa orang lain melarang, but actually they're not actually forbidding women to work and also not punishing men to participate in childcare. So we told this about, oh, you have misperception about how much people supporting women to participate in the labor market and also men participating in childcare. And then we've seen a good outcome from that, which is measured by whether or not the respondents are actually choosing voucher for online course to improve their labor market skills and also shopping vouchers. So jadi dia disuruh milih antara ikutan online course untuk memperbaiki skillnya untuk masuk ke labor market versus voucher nyebut merek nggak apa ya, Indomaret dan Alfa, untuk melihat bagaimana respon mereka terhadap misperception. And it turns out we've seen that more people actually choosing the voucher for doing the online course for improving their skills in the labor market. So that means that just by informing that you are wrong about other people support is actually can help to shift their support towards more supporting women to participate in the labor market. So that's my answer, Pak. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Ibu Rudy. So I think that perhaps end our session today, and then I'm not going to conclude. There's a lot of lessons, insights, important points that I think that should not end with this the end of this knowledge exchange, knowledge forum. A lot of us here came from different background, government, donors, NGO, academics. So I think this something definitely, this is a problem that cannot be solved alone by a single agency. So I think let's continue the discussion. Let's set this as one of the important agenda for the betterness, for the better future of Indonesia, promoting the care economics, improving the female labor participation, and of course the betterness of everyone here. So let's give a round of applause to our two distinguished speakers and also two discussions. And with that, I'll give it back to Usha. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Elan Satriawan, for the very insightful panel, and also for speakers and and for the speakers. Please remain on the stage, because now we would like to invite Professor Nunung Nuryartono from Coordinating Ministry for Human Development and Cultural Affairs to give souvenirs for all the speakers and the moderator. Thank you, Professor. Now, Professor Nunung Nuryartono will give it to Mr. Elan Satriawan as the moderator of the session, followed by Ibu Ririn Salwa Purnamasari, Senior Economist at the World Bank East Asia Pacific. And finally, to Ibu Diara Hadi Sultroyonaluri, Senior Researcher at LPM FBUI and Gender Economist at Prospera. Please remain at the stage for photo session. Satu, dua, okay. Thank you very much to all the moderators, the speakers, and Professor Nunung Nuryartono. Please return to your seats. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause to all the speakers and the moderators of today's session. We hope that through this knowledge forum, we can create a strong collaboration and better pathways to achieve comprehensive and inclusive strategies to alleviate poverty in Southeast Asia.
As we already hear from the panels, women's economic participation is a critical dimension for any country's development, and supporting them with the care infrastructure, facilities, and social protection that enables them to meaningfully engage in the economy should be an integral part of the future policy decisions in Indonesia and also other countries in Southeast Asia. I would like to bring you to the screen on the right and the left, as we now have QR codes for you to scan if you would like to download the materials from the sessions today, from all the insightful speakers and also the great panels that convened by the moderators. Okay. Now, we hope you found the forum insightful, and now we are going to hear a closing remark from the Secretary of Coordinating Ministry for Human Development and Cultural Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia. I would like to welcome to the stage Mr. Andi Mergantara. Mr. Andi, the stage is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. Yang saya hormati Bu Maria Christine Jovina J. Belms dari The Philippines Commission on Women, Ibu Ririn Salva Purnamasari, Senior Economist World Bank, Ibu Dia Hadi Setio Naluri, peneliti senior di LPM UI dan gender ekonomis di Prospera, Bapak Ibu pejabat Kemenko PMK serta pejabat dari Kemensos, Bappenas, Difed, Proaktif, Prospera, dan TMP2K selaku penanggap dan moderator yang tidak bisa saya sebutkan satu persatu, dan juga seluruh peserta Knowledge Forum yang berbahagia. Puji syukur kehadirat Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala atas perkenannya kita dapat menyelesaikan kegiatan pada siang hari ini. Pertama, saya ingin mengucapkan terima kasih kepada seluruh pembicara dan penanggap yang telah berbagi pengetahuan dan pengalaman yang tentunya sangat bermanfaat untuk memperdalam pemahaman kita, terutama tentang care ekonomi dan perlindungan sosial sebagai sebuah cara untuk mendorong kesetaraan gender dan pembangunan keluarga. Dalam pemahaman saya, diskusi hari ini telah berhasil mengeksplorasi keterkaitan berbagai isu penting seperti gender, care ekonomi, partisipasi kerja perempuan, perlindungan sosial, dan kemiskinan dari aspek ekonomi maupun sosial budaya. Bapak Ibu hadirin sekalian, pada kesempatan ini saya ingin menyampaikan secara singkat refleksi terhadap isu-isu yang telah kita diskusikan. Yang pertama adalah gender merupakan sebuah komponen kemajuan yang sangat berkaitan dengan variabel lainnya. Untuk mencapai kesetaraan gender diperlukan pendekatan yang komprehensif dan multidimensi. Yang kedua, pembelajaran dari sejumlah negara ASEAN memperlihatkan adanya kekuatan transformatif untuk mendorong pengakuan atas potensi dan kontribusi perempuan, baik yang terlibat dalam care ekonomi berbayar maupun tidak berbayar. Yang ketiga, care ekonomi yang kerap diabaikan merupakan esensi dari keberlanjutan sebuah bangsa. Pengakuan dan penghargaan terhadap care work perlu didorong di berbagai tingkatan, mulai dari keluarga, komunitas, hingga pengambil kebijakan dan pemangku kepentingan. Ketika kita menghargai peran care ekonomi, maka kita membuka jalan bagi pertumbuhan inklusif di Indonesia maupun di ASEAN. Pengakuan terhadap care ekonomi juga dapat membuka akses perempuan terhadap perlindungan sosial, dan hal ini sangat penting dalam upaya pengentasan kemiskinan, termasuk kemiskinan ekstrim dan juga ketimpangan. Bapak Ibu hadirin yang berbahagia, kita tahu bahwa tingkat pendidikan perempuan mengalami peningkatan, namun belum tercermin dalam tingkat partisipasi kerja perempuan yang masih rendah. Kondisi ini menekankan pentingnya mengatasi hambatan perempuan untuk memasuki dunia kerja, seperti penyediaan layanan penitipan anak, perawatan jangka panjang, dan layanan serta infrastruktur perawatan lainnya. Menjamin akses ekonomi perempuan tentunya dapat berkontribusi terhadap upaya penghapusan kemiskinan ekstrim yang sedang didorong oleh pemerintah Indonesia. Dalam konteks migrasi, perempuan di Asia Tenggara seperti Indonesia dan Filipina mendominasi sektor perawatan. Namun hal ini kerap berimbas pada kualitas anak dan keluarga yang ditinggalkan, terutama yang memiliki ketergantungan tinggi seperti anak balita, lansia, dan penyandang disabilitas. Hal ini juga penting untuk menjadi perhatian kita bersama. Bapak Ibu sekalian yang berbahagia, dalam kesempatan ini saya mengajak bersama-sama kita kembangkan kebijakan dan program yang lebih responsif gender. Mari kita gunakan pembelajaran dari Filipina dan negara ASEAN lainnya sebagai inspirasi untuk menciptakan jalan keluar dari kemiskinan dan menjaga pembangunan berkelanjutan yang inklusif. Saya berharap hasil forum ini dapat berkontribusi pada komitmen dan penguatan sistem perlindungan sosial dan pengakuan terhadap kontribusi ke ekonomi di tingkat nasional dan regional. Akhir kata, saya sampaikan penghargaan dan terima kasih kepada teman-teman dari DFED, Proaktif, dan Prospera, dan juga Bapak Ibu lainnya, pembicara, moderator, dan semuanya yang telah mendukung kegiatan ini. Serta terima kasih kepada seluruh peserta yang sampai hari ini masih duduk dengan tertib di meja masing-masing. Semoga visi bersama kita dapat memandu kita menuju masa depan yang bercerah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Mr. Andi Megantara, for the closing remarks. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to extend our sincerest gratitude for gracing us with your presence, and to all the speakers, the moderators, for the very informative sessions. We would like to thank the Australia-Indonesia Partnership for the support through Proaktif and Prospera program. I would now like to inform you that lunch will be served at the right corner, and we wish you all a pleasant time during your stay in Jakarta. Thank you very much.
Dulu semenjak belum ada listrik di rumah kami, kegiatan sehari-hari terutama belajar untuk anak sekolah sangat sulit. Kadang menumpang di rumah keluarga, kadang harus memakai lampu teplok.
Wau neng hitampi, neng saniki mboten kunonton setahun, mboten aten nyambut damel, mboten saged pun. Pak tidak yang sini lama, tidak melakukan sini sini, dalam panuki, tidak main serodokan les.
Saya sebenarnya dulu kerja di pariwisata, jadi salah satu villa yang ada di Denpasar. Tapi ketika pandemi ada pemberhentian karyawan di tempat saya bekerja.
Kami melihat tetangga kami yang anaknya sekolah tinggi, kami rindu. Tapi saya harus berjuang seperti apa?
karena kebutuhan tidak mencukupi Bapak. Tuhan, saya tidak punya apa-apa. Tapi kalau memang ini waktu Tuhan, pasti saya akan dapat rumah.
Bapak sudah pergi dan Bapak tinggalkan gaji bagi kami. Mungkin itu yang menopang kami dalam kami punya kehidupan hari-hari untuk menunjang kebutuhan keluarga dan juga kebutuhan anak-anak dalam mereka sekolah. Kalau untuk pribadi Mama merasa bahwa tidak cukup. Cuma 2.100.000 tidak cukup untuk kebutuhan keluarga kami hari-hari.
Ya, Mama bikin bagaimana? Mama mau tinggal di rumah, mau jadi apa? Mama dan tidak mau Mama harus bantu Bapak. Karena Mama dan Bapak punya hidup ini hanya nelayan. Memang kita punya hidup itu menderita dulu.
Kebumen ini salah satu kabupaten yang hitungannya termiskin di Jawa Tengah. Kita sangat concern karena hampir 25,6% anggaran itu kita curahkan untuk penanganan kemiskinan.
Langkah-langkah kita dalam penanggulangan kemiskinan ekstrim, yang pertama adalah mengurangi beban pengeluaran, yang kedua adalah meningkatkan pendapatan, yang ketiga adalah meningkatkan ekonomi kerakyatan, UMKM dan usaha-usaha yang ada di masyarakat, yang kelima adalah mensinergiskan program-program yang ada di pemerintah Kabupaten Kebumen.
Yang kami lakukan adalah penanganan kawasan kumuh dahulu sebagai kantong kemiskinan dengan kolaborasi bersama mulai dari 7 komponen kekumuhan tadi ya, diharapkan kemiskinan ini juga turut berkurang dengan penanganan kantong-kantong kemiskinan tadi.
Klaster pertama adalah program bantuan sosial terpadu berbasis rumah tangga, keluarga atau individu. Klaster kedua adalah program pemberdayaan masyarakat dan penguatan pelaku usaha mikro dan kecil. Dan klaster yang terakhir adalah program lainnya yang secara langsung atau tidak langsung dapat meningkatkan kegiatan ekonomi dan kesejahteraan masyarakat miskin.
Kami keluarkan kebijakan baru untuk pengembangan jagung ini. Kami minta kepada semua kepala desa dan camat untuk kawal satu desa atau satu lurah minimal 5 hektar.
Puji Tuhan kami sudah punya data sehingga kami dapat melihat di beberapa wilayah administrasi ada 6 distrik, 57 kampung. Dari 6 distrik itu kita petakan semua melalui data SAIK yang sudah ada. Sehingga kami sudah tahu mana yang miskin, mana yang miskin ekstrim.
Upaya penghapusan kemiskinan ekstrim ini perlu dilakukan secara sinergi, secara konvergen, dan juga secara kolaboratif. Oleh karena itu, dalam rangka untuk pelaksanaan dari Instruksi Presiden nomor 4 tahun 2022 tentang percepatan penghapusan kemiskinan ekstrim, kami di TNP 2K mencoba untuk mendorong sebetulnya upaya untuk peningkatan kolaborasi antar pihak. Dalam hal ini ada 5 pihak yang akan terlibat secara aktif di dalam upaya percepatan penghapusan kemiskinan ekstrim atau yang dikenal dengan 5 helix atau pentahelix.
Pemerintah daerah membentuk sebuah lembaga sekretariat bersama untuk menjadi mitra bagi teman-teman NGO LSM baik internasional, regional dan lokal dan juga pihak swasta serta masyarakat untuk bekerja bersama-sama. Menangani kemiskinan ekstrim bagi kami bahwa semua upaya kita itu tepat sasaran dan kita harus membuka diri terhadap kerjasama dengan semua pihak. Ini tidak urusan pemerintah semata karena ini urusan kita semua, tetapi kita harus membangun kolaborasi dengan semua pihak dengan program-program lain yang kami tahu punya dampak pada masyarakat.
Kami diberi 40 titik sebenarnya bantuan untuk peternakan ayam yang masing-masing titik itu nilainya sekitar 20-25 juta.
One of our projects in Bali focuses on improving the coffee value chain. So in this project we work with many different actors. We work with the farmers, we work with the local government, the cooperatives, as well as coffee buyers.
Kegiatan atau materi yang kami coba perkenalkan kepada petani kopi di Pajahan, salah satunya adalah bagaimana cara mengelola limbah kopi, antara lain adalah pupuk organik, selai kopi, yang bisa menjadi nilai tambahan kepada kelompok tani maupun kelompok wanita tani di Desa Pajahan.
Kita mulai dengan tanaman umur pendek. Tanaman dari usia 0 sampai dengan 30 hari, 0, 21, 30 hari seperti
kangkung, bayam, caisim, satu bedeng dengan ukuran 1 kali 10 meter itu panen rata-rata 200.000. Maka kita wajibkan satu petani 10 bedeng dengan panen 2 juta per bulan. Dari hasil penjualan itu mereka ada yang beli sepeda motor, ada yang bisa pasang listrik, bahkan itu dipakai untuk kuliah anak.
Keterbatasan akses untuk mendapatkan produk kami itu menjadi kendala bagi petani. Maka dari itu kami memutuskan untuk menempatkan cabang di NTT, khususnya di Kupang. Dengan harapan adanya cabang ini bisa memangkas disparitas harga yang cukup signifikan, sehingga kebermanfaatan dari pupuk ini bisa digunakan dengan semaksimal-maksimalnya.
Kami dari Bank BPD Bali menyalurkan beberapa program ECR salah satu bedah rumah, ingin membantu masyarakat yang keterbelakangan miskin, apalagi rumahnya belum layak huni, mungkin belum punya toilet, belum punya sarana yang lain.
Di Sumatera Utara sendiri, di wilayah kami mendapatkan target 5.600 pelanggan dengan program BPBL atau Bantuan Pemasangan Baru Listrik. Salah satunya adalah dengan kita melistriki masyarakat yang memang tidak mampu.
Program KKN di Universitas Udayana yang pertama itu adalah KKN tematik yang melibatkan mahasiswa dalam waktu yang lebih lama, yaitu